The winter Lillian Hart nearly bled to death in a Wyoming blizzard wasn't the night she almost died. It was the night she finally started living. In 1879, on the frozen edge of a frontier town that had never shown her mercy, a 20-year-old woman society had written off as worthless, stood between survival and surrender. What happened in those brutal months would shatter everything the world believed about worth, beauty, and the kind of strength that can't be measured by a mirror. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lillian's journey travels. The bread was burning. Lillian Hart could smell it through the thin walls of her cabin, that acrid edge cutting through the winter air like a knife through butter that had frozen solid 3 weeks ago. She shoved another log into the stove with hands that had gone numb an hour past, her breath coming out in thick clouds that hung in the frigid air before dissolving into nothing. Just like her, she thought bitterly. Present for a moment, then forgotten. The Wyoming wind howled outside, rattling the shutters she'd stuffed with old newspaper to keep out the cold. It didn't work. Nothing worked anymore. The creek beside her cabin had frozen into a ribbon of gray ice in early December, and now, 6 weeks into the new year, the whole world felt like it had hardened into something cruel and unforgiving. She pulled the bread from the oven, slightly too dark on one side, but edible. That was the standard now. Edible. Not good, not beautiful, just enough to keep breathing. The knock came just as she was wrapping the loaves in clean cloth. 3 sharp raps against wood that sounded like judgment itself. Lillian froze, her heart suddenly loud in her chest. No one came to her cabin. The townsfolk of Redemption Flats had made that clear enough over the years. She was the fat girl who lived by the creek, the one mothers pointed to when warning their daughters about gluttony and shame. She was a cautionary tale, not a person worth visiting. Another knock, harder this time. "Miss Hart, you in there?" A man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. Not one of the boys from town who sometimes threw rocks at her shutters on Saturday nights when they were drunk enough to think cruelty was comedy. Lillian pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the rapid flutter beneath her worn cotton dress. The fabric was old, patched in 3 places, let out twice to accommodate a body she'd long ago stopped trying to change. The mirror in her cabin had cracked last summer, and she'd never replaced it. What was the point? She knew what she looked like. The world reminded her daily. "Miss Hart, I know you're in there, saw your smoke." The voice wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact, businesslike. That somehow made it worse. She could handle cruelty, had learned to let it roll off her like rain off oilcloth. But civility? That was dangerous. Civility made you hope. She opened the door 6 inches, keeping her body behind it. The man on her porch was tall, 40-something, with a face carved by wind and sun into something harder than the frozen ground. His coat was good quality, his boots better. A rancher, then. Someone with land and cattle and a reputation to protect. Someone who definitely had no business at her door. "Can I help you?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended, almost apologetic for existing. "Wade Mercer." He touched the brim of his hat but didn't remove it. "I own the ranch 12 miles north of here, the big spread near the timberline." She knew it. Everyone knew Mercer Ranch? It was the largest operation in 3 counties. The kind of place that employed 30 men year-round and twice that during cattle season. The kind of place that had its own schoolhouse and bunkhouse and probably a dozen people who could cook better than she ever could. "I know who you are, Mr. Mercer." She kept her eyes down, studying the frost patterns on her porch boards. "I still don't know why you're here. My cook took sick 4 days ago." He said it flat, like he was reporting weather. "Pneumonia. Doc says he won't be back on his feet for 6 weeks, maybe more. I've got 20 men who need feeding 3 times a day, and not a one of them can do more than burn coffee and ruin bacon." Lillian's grip tightened on the door. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not asking for charity, Miss Hart. I'm offering work. Room and board at the ranch, plus $60 for the 6 weeks. More if my cook doesn't recover and you're willing to stay on." $60. That was more money than she'd seen in the past year combined. Enough to fix her roof properly, buy a real winter coat, maybe even put something away for the spring when work was always scarce. It was also impossible. "Mr. Mercer?" She forced herself to meet his eyes, just for a second. They were gray, like the frozen creek, and just as unreadable. I appreciate the offer, but you're asking the wrong person. I'm not. Men don't. She felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold. No one wants someone who looks like me in their house, especially not a ranch full of cowboys. She'd started to close the door when his hand shot out, catching the edge, not forcing it, just holding it steady. Miss Hart. His voice hadn't changed, still that same flat pragmatism. I don't give a damn what you look like. I need someone who can cook enough food to keep 20 men working through winter. I heard you bake bread for the mercantile, and I heard it's the best in 3 towns. That's all I care about. Can you cook or can't you? The question hung in the air between them, sharp as icicles. Could she cook? It was the only thing she'd ever been good at, the only skill her mother had taught her before dying of consumption when Lillian was 15. Cooking was math and chemistry and timing, all things that didn't care what you looked like. A roux didn't judge, yeast didn't mock, heat was heat, and if you understood it, you could make magic. But feeding 20 men, living in a bunkhouse kitchen, facing that kind of scrutiny every single day? They'll laugh at me, she whispered. Probably. Wade Mercer didn't soften it, didn't offer false comfort. For about a day, maybe 2, then they'll be too busy eating to care. I run a working ranch, Miss Hart, not a finishing school. My men know better than to let their mouths ruin their meals. Something in his tone suggested consequences for anyone who forgot that lesson. Lillian looked past him at the gray January landscape, at the town of Redemption Flats barely visible through the blowing snow. She thought about the women who crossed the street to avoid her, the children who made pig noises when she passed, the men who looked through her like she was furniture. She thought about her cabin that was slowly falling apart, about the loneliness that had become so familiar she sometimes forgot it was there, about the future that looked exactly like the present stretching out until she died alone by this frozen creek. $60, 6 weeks, a chance to be useful instead of pitied. I can cook, she said quietly. I can cook real good. Then we leave at first light. Wade Mercer stepped back from her door. Pack what you need. I'll have a wagon here by sunrise. He was halfway to his horse when she called out, Mr. Mercer? Her voice barely carried over the wind. Why me? You could have anyone. There's Mrs. Chen at the boarding house, or Mrs. Chen's got her own business to run. He swung into his saddle with practiced ease. And everyone else I asked said no. You're not my first choice, Miss Hart. You're my only choice, but something tells me that works both ways. He rode off into the storm before she could respond, leaving Lillian standing in her doorway with cold wind cutting through her dress and something dangerous blooming in her chest. Hope. Bet. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, Lillian packed her 2 dresses, her 1 good apron, her mother's recipe book with its pages worn soft as fabric. She packed her knives, good German steel her father had bought before he disappeared west 15 years ago, and the small sack of salt she'd been hoarding. She packed and repacked, her hands shaking with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite excitement. At 3 a.m, she finally sat down at her small table and wrote out a list of what she'd need. If she was going to feed 20 men, she'd need to know what the ranch pantry held. Flour, obviously. Sugar, lard, coffee, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, whatever vegetables they'd managed to store from last harvest. She'd worked in the mercantile kitchen for 3 years after her mother died, before the owner's wife decided having Lillian around was bad for business. In those 3 years, she'd learned to cook for crowds, to stretch ingredients, to make something satisfying from almost nothing. She could do this. She had to do this. The wagon arrived just as the eastern sky was turning from black to iron gray. Wade Mercer sat in the driver's seat, his breath steaming in the pre-dawn cold. You ready? Lillian looked back at her cabin one last time. It wasn't much. A single room with a sleeping loft, walls that didn't quite keep out the weather, a stove that smoked when the wind came from the north. But it was hers, the only thing in the world that belonged to her. I'm ready. The ride to Mercer Ranch took 3 hours through snow that had started falling again, thick and heavy. Wade didn't talk much, just guided the horses along roads that were barely visible beneath the white. Lillian sat beside him, her bag clutched in her lap, trying not to think about what she was riding toward. "You got family in town?" Wade asked as they crested a hill and Redemption Flats disappeared behind them. "No, sir. All gone." "Anyone gonna miss you if you don't come back?" It was a brutal question, but Lillian appreciated the honesty of it. "No, sir." He nodded like that settled something. "Good. That makes things simpler." "Makes what simpler?" "Deciding to stay. If you're any good at this, I'll want you permanent. Can't offer that if you got roots pulling you back to town." Lillian turned to look at him, this rancher who'd shown up at her door with a job offer like it was nothing. "You don't know if I can cook yet." "What if I'm terrible?" The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. "Then we'll all starve together and you'll have a real interesting 6 weeks." Despite herself, despite everything, Lillian laughed. It came out rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in years, but it was genuine. The ranch appeared suddenly as they rounded a stand of pine trees, a sprawling collection of buildings laid out in a rough square. The main house was 2 stories, solid timber with a stone chimney already trailing smoke. Behind it stood the bunkhouse, the barn, a chicken coop, storage sheds, and off to the side a building that had to be the kitchen. It was bigger than her entire cabin. "That's where you'll be working." Wade nodded toward the kitchen building. "It's got a stove, a good one, and a pantry that connects to the root cellar. Living quarters are attached, small room, but it's got a real bed and a stove of its own." A real bed. Lillian couldn't remember the last time she'd slept on anything but a rope frame with a corn husk mattress. The wagon rolled to a stop in the yard, and immediately doors started opening. Men emerged from the bunkhouse, from the barn, drawn by curiosity or habit or both. 20 faces turning to look at her. Lillian felt every eye, felt the weight of their assessment. She saw the moment recognition hit, not of her personally, but of what she represented. The fat girl. The joke. The thing that didn't belong. Someone laughed. A young cowboy, couldn't be more than 19, elbowed his neighbor and said something Lillian couldn't quite hear but could definitely imagine. Her throat tightened. This was a mistake. She should have stayed in her cabin, should have, "That's enough." Wade's voice cut through the yard like a blade. Not loud, but absolutely certain. "This is Miss Hart. She's your cook for the next 6 weeks, maybe longer. Anyone who's got a problem with that can draw his pay and ride out before lunch." The yard went quiet. "Miss Hart." Wade climbed down from the wagon and came around to help her. His hand was steady, impersonal. "Kitchen's this way." She followed him across the yard, feeling every step watched, hearing whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. But no one laughed again. Whatever authority Wade Mercer held over these men, it was absolute. The kitchen was warm, heated by a massive cast-iron stove that was already burning. Someone had stocked it before dawn. The room was bigger than Lillian had imagined. Long work tables, shelves lined with dishes and pans, windows that would let in good light once the sun rose properly. "Pantry's through there?" Wade pointed to a heavy door. "Root cellar below it. We butchered 2 hogs last month, got a beef quarter in the cold shed. Chickens are laying decent despite the weather. Coffee's in the tin on that shelf. There's a barrel of flour, another of cornmeal. You need something we don't got. Make me a list." Lillian set down her bag and walked slowly through the space, her hands trailing over the work surfaces. The stove had 4 burners and an oven big enough to roast a whole pig. There were Dutch ovens hanging from hooks, skillets in 6 sizes, knives that looked sharp and well-maintained. It was a professional kitchen, a real one. "Mr. Mercer," she turned to face him, "you said your cook got sick 4 days ago. Who's been feeding the men?" "Each other, mostly. It's been rough." "What time do they expect breakfast?" Wade pulled out a pocket watch. "Sun up. About 90 minutes from now." 90 minutes to prepare breakfast for 20 men she'd never met. In a kitchen she'd never used, with supplies she'd never inventoried. Lillian felt something settle in her chest, something that felt almost like calm. This was a problem she could solve. This was math. "I'll need the stove hotter and someone to haul water, at least 4 buckets to start. If there's anyone in the bunkhouse who's not completely useless with a knife, send them over to help prep." Wade's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. "I'll send over Tommy. He's green, but he follows orders." "Good. Tell him to bring whatever eggs the chickens gave up this morning." Wade nodded and headed for the door, then paused. "Miss Hart, the men are going to test you. It's what they do. Don't let them see you scared." "I am scared, Mr. Mercer." "I know. Don't let them see it." Then he was gone, and Lillian was alone in a kitchen that was about to become either her salvation or her spectacular failure. She took off her coat, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. The pantry was well stocked. Wade clearly ran his operation with military precision. She found sacks of flour, beans, rice, dried apples. The root cellar yielded potatoes, onions, carrots that had been packed in sand. In the cold shed, she found the beef quarter Wade had mentioned, plus slabs of bacon and the pork he'd referenced. 90 minutes wasn't enough time for anything fancy, but it was enough for substantial. She started coffee first. Cowboys ran on coffee, she knew that much. Got the pot going with water from the pump outside. Grounds measured precisely. While it brewed, she mixed up biscuit dough, her hands moving through the familiar motions. Flour, lard, salt, baking powder, buttermilk from the crock in the cold room. Tommy arrived as she was cutting biscuits, a kid with red hair and nervous energy, holding a basket of eggs like they were made of crystal. "Ma'am, Mr. Mercer said you needed help. You know how to break eggs without getting shell everywhere." "Yes, ma'am." "Then start breaking. I need 3 dozen. His eyes went wide. 3 dozen? We're feeding 20 men, Tommy. That's not even 2 eggs each. Get moving." She set him up at one of the work tables while she sliced bacon, thick slabs that would render down crispy. Got it frying in the biggest skillet while she checked the biscuits. The oven was hotter than she was used to, but that was fine. She could adjust. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, she had biscuits in the oven, bacon sizzling, and Tommy was scrambling eggs in butter with a concentration that suggested he'd never cooked for more than his own breakfast. "Add salt," she instructed. "More than that. And pepper. These men work hard, they need flavor." "Yes, ma'am." The kitchen began to fill with smells, coffee and bacon and bread rising. Lillian worked with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this all her life, moving between stove and oven and prep table in a rhythm that was almost musical. She heard the bunkhouse door open, heard boots on frozen ground. They were coming. Her heart kicked up again, but she didn't stop moving, pulled the biscuits out, golden brown, perfect rise, started plating food with Tommy's help. Bacon, eggs, 4 biscuits per plate, coffee in tin cups. The kitchen door opened. Wade came in first, followed by his men. They filed in like soldiers, taking seats at the long tables that had been set up in the adjoining dining room. 20 men, most of them young, all of them watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to skepticism to outright mockery. Lillian kept her head down and kept working. She served Wade first, that seemed like protocol, then moved down the tables, setting plates in front of men who either ignored her completely or stared at her like she was some kind of exotic animal. The young cowboy who'd laughed earlier was third from the end. He had a smirk that suggested he was about to say something clever. Lillian put his plate down hard enough that coffee sloshed in his cup. Their eyes met for just a second. Hers were harder than he expected. The smirk faded. When every man had food, Lillian retreated to the kitchen and began cleaning up, her back to the dining room. She couldn't watch them eat, couldn't bear to see the disappointment or the mockery or whatever was coming. Behind her, she heard the scrape of forks on plates, heard the quiet sounds of eating, then heard silence. Had she poisoned them, burned something, made some catastrophic mistake? "Miss Hart," Wade's voice carried from the dining room. "You planning to eat?" She turned, dish rag still in her hands. Every man at those tables had stopped eating and was staring at her. I usually eat after," she stammered. "Not here, you don't." Wade gestured to an empty seat at the end of the main table. "We eat together at Mercer Ranch. That's the rule." It was possibly the most terrifying invitation Lillian had ever received. Sit with them? With 20 strange men who'd been laughing at her an hour ago. But Wade's expression said this wasn't a request. She sat down, hands folded in her lap, unable to look at anyone. Someone passed her a plate. It was already filled, biscuits, bacon, eggs, more food than she usually allowed herself in a day. "Ma'am?" It was Tommy, his voice quiet. These biscuits are the best thing I've eaten in 3 months. A older cowboy next to him nodded. Best thing I've eaten in 3 years. You make the bacon different somehow? I I rendered some of the fat first, then cooked the slices in it. Gets crispier that way. It's real good, another voice chimed in. The eggs, too. You put something in them? Just butter and salt and pepper. She risked a glance up. The men weren't mocking her. They were eating like food was going out of style, sopping up eggs with biscuits, draining coffee cups and refilling them. The young cowboy who'd laughed earlier caught her eye. He looked embarrassed now. Ma'am, I want to apologize for— Eat your breakfast, Lillian interrupted. She didn't want his apology, didn't know what to do with it. He nodded and went back to his plate. Wade said nothing, but when Lillian glanced his way, he met her eyes and gave a single, slight nod. She'd passed the first test. The days fell into a rhythm faster than Lillian expected. Up before dawn to start coffee and get the stove going. Breakfast at sunrise. Biscuits or cornbread, bacon or sausage, eggs however the men would eat them. Cleanup while the men headed out to their various jobs, feeding cattle, repairing fence lines, chopping firewood. Mid-morning break meant fresh coffee and whatever she'd baked that morning. Cookies if supplies allowed, dried apple pie if they didn't. Lunch was the big meal, stews usually, or roasts, things that could cook slow while she prepped for dinner. She learned each man's preferences through observation. Frank didn't like onions. Pete would eat anything with molasses in it. Old Charlie had bad teeth and needed things cooked soft. Dinner was simpler, leftovers from lunch, fresh bread, maybe a soup if she had the energy. Then cleanup, which took longer than the cooking, and prep work for the next morning. By the end of the first week, Lillian was exhausted in a way that felt almost good. Her body ached from standing all day. Her hands were burned in 3 places from the temperamental oven, but she was useful, needed. Every meal that came out of her kitchen mattered. The men had stopped mocking her. They still stared sometimes. She caught them at it, but the cruelty had faded. In its place was something close to respect. Tommy had become her unofficial assistant, showing up before breakfast to help prep and staying after dinner to wash dishes. He talked while he worked, about his family back in Missouri, about the horse he was saving up to buy, about the girl in town he was too nervous to speak to. Lillian mostly listened, but sometimes she offered advice. Not about courting, she had no business there, but about cooking. Tommy was learning, his knife work getting better, his biscuits almost matching hers now. On the 8th day, Wade started staying after dinner. He didn't announce it or make a production of it, just appeared in the kitchen after the men had cleared out, rolled up his sleeves, and started washing dishes while Lillian dried and put them away. They didn't talk much. Wade wasn't a talker, but there was something comfortable about the silence, something that reminded Lillian of working alongside her mother in their old kitchen back before the world got hard. You settling in all right? Wade asked one evening as they finished the last of the pots. Yes, sir. The men giving you trouble? No more than expected. Wade dried his hands on a towel and leaned against the work table. You're good at this, Miss Hart. Better than I expected. It shouldn't have mattered. One man's opinion shouldn't have carried that much weight. But something in Lillian's chest went warm anyway. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Call me Wade. We're not formal here. Then you should call me Lillian. He nodded. Lillian. Hearing her name in his voice felt strangely intimate, like they'd crossed some invisible line. Wade. She forced herself to meet his eyes. When you came to my door, you said I wasn't your first choice. How many people turned you down? 7. All of them said no to $60? All of them said no to living on a ranch with 20 cowboys they didn't know, said it wasn't proper, said they had reputations to protect. Wade's expression was unreadable. Turns out reputation matters more to some folks than money. And you figured I didn't have a reputation worth protecting. I figured you were smart enough to know opportunity when you saw it. It wasn't an insult the way he said it. It was just fact. I needed this, Lillian admitted quietly. I was going to lose my cabin come spring. Couldn't keep up with what little rent I owed. This job saved me. Wade was quiet for a long moment. That cabin by the creek. You been living there alone? 3 years since my mother died. That's no kind of life for a 20-year-old girl. Wasn't much choice in it. There's always choice, Wade pushed off from the table. You could have married. Someone would have taken you. Lillian laughed, but there was no humor in it. No one wants to marry someone who looks like me, Wade. That's just reality. People are idiots. Maybe, but they're still the people I have to live among. Wade studied her with those gray eyes that saw too much. You planning to go back? After the 6 weeks? She'd been avoiding that question, even in her own head. Going back meant her cabin, her loneliness, her slow slide into poverty and invisibility. But staying meant what? Living permanently on a ranch full of men, feeding them day after day, growing old in a kitchen that would never really be hers? I don't know, she said honestly. Well, Wade headed for the door. You got time to figure it out. After he left, Lillian stood in her kitchen, because that's what it had become, her kitchen, and felt something shift inside her. For the first time in 3 years, she had time, had a future that extended beyond the next meal, the next day, the next desperate attempt to survive. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. The storm hit on the 15th day. Lillian had felt it coming. The pressure change, the way the animals got restless, the particular quality of silence that came before bad weather. She'd grown up on the frontier. She knew the signs. She spent the day before cooking everything she could, preparing for the possibility that they'd be snowed in. Extra bread, 3 pots of stew, beans soaking for quick cooking. She filled every available container with water and made sure the wood boxes were packed full. The men knew it too. They worked double time that day, getting the cattle into the closer pastures, securing the outbuildings, stocking the bunkhouse with firewood. The snow started just after dinner, light at first, then building to something biblical. By midnight, the wind was howling like a living thing, rattling the windows and piling snow against the buildings in drifts that reached the eaves. Lillian lay in her small room off the kitchen, listening to the storm rage. She'd banked the stove but kept it burning. If it went out in this weather, they might not get it lit again, and then everyone would freeze. Sleep was impossible. At 2 in the morning, she heard something. Not the wind, not the building settling, something else. Something that sounded almost like crying? Lillian sat up, heart pounding. She was imagining things, had to be. No one would be outside in this weather. There it was again. Faint, almost lost in the wind, but definitely a human voice. She grabbed her coat and fought her way to the kitchen door. The wind nearly ripped it from her hands when she opened it, snow blasting into the room like 1,000 frozen needles. "Hello?" she shouted into the storm. "Is someone there?" Nothing, just wind and snow and darkness. She was about to close the door when she heard it again, closer this time. "Help!" Lillian grabbed the lantern she kept by the door and stepped out into the blizzard. The cold hit her like a wall, stealing her breath. Snow was already piling up against the buildings, drifts 3 feet high in places. "Where are you?" she called. "Here, please." The voice was coming from near the barn. Lillian pushed forward, using the buildings as windbreaks when she could, fighting through drifts that came up to her thighs. Her skirts were quickly soaked and heavy, dragging at her legs. She found him collapsed against the barn door. A boy, couldn't be more than 10, wearing clothes too thin for winter and shaking so hard his teeth rattled. "Oh, God!" Lillian dropped to her knees beside him. "What are you doing out here?" "Lost," the boy managed through chattering teeth. "Was traveling with Uncle, got separated in the storm." His lips were blue. His hands were white. He was dying. Lillian didn't think. She scooped the boy up. He weighed almost nothing and staggered back toward the kitchen. The wind fought her every step, trying to steal her breath, trying to push her down into the snow where they'd both freeze. Her lungs burned. Her muscles screamed. The boy was a dead weight in her arms, not helping, maybe already unconscious. 20 feet to the kitchen door. 15. 10. She fell twice but got back up both times, holding the boy against her chest, using her body to shield him from the worst of the wind. When she finally crashed through the kitchen door, she didn't have the strength to close it properly. Just kicked it shut and stumbled to the stove, laying the boy down on the floor in front of it. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. No, come on, stay with me." Lillian stripped off his wet clothes with shaking hands, wrapped him in every blanket she could find, got water heating for tea, rubbed his hands and feet to get circulation going. Please, she whispered. Please don't die. Not here. Not after you made it this far. The boy's eyes flickered open. They were brown, confused. Where? You're safe. You're in the kitchen at Mercer Ranch. I'm going to get you warm, and then you're going to tell me about your uncle, all right? He nodded, then his eyes closed again. Lillian worked through the night. Got warm, not hot, liquid into him, kept him wrapped and close to the stove, monitored his breathing and his color. Slowly, so slowly, the blue faded from his lips. His shaking eased. His breathing deepened. By dawn, he was sleeping properly, not unconscious but actually resting. Lillian sat on the floor beside him, so exhausted she was shaking, and let herself cry. Just for a minute, just to release the terror that had been building since she'd heard that voice in the storm. She'd saved him. This boy whose name she didn't even know yet, she'd saved him. The kitchen door opened. Wade stood in the doorway, snow-covered, his expression thunderstruck. What the hell happened here? Lillian wiped her eyes and got unsteadily to her feet. Found him during the storm. He's alive. Barely. We need to find his uncle. Wade crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to one knee beside the boy, checked his pulse and breathing with the efficiency of someone who'd seen his share of near freezes. He's lucky you heard him. Another hour, and he'd be dead. I know. Wade stood and turned to face her properly. For the first time since she'd met him, his expression was something other than neutral. He looked shaken. You went out in that storm? Lillian, you could have died. You could have gotten lost between here and the barn and frozen 6 feet from safety. I know that too. Then why? Because he was crying for help. Her voice came out harder than she intended. And I'm the only one who heard, so I went. What else was I supposed to do? Wade stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not the fat girl from town. Not the cook he'd hired out of desperation. But the woman who'd risked her life in a blizzard to save a stranger. You're something else, Lillian Hart, he said quietly. Before she could respond, before she could figure out what to do with the way he was looking at her, the boy stirred. Uncle Tom, he mumbled, was headed to Millerville. Got separated near the canyon fork. Shh. Lillian knelt beside him again. Rest now. We'll find your uncle once the storm passes. They did find him 3 days later when the weather cleared. Tom Brennan had taken shelter in a line shack 2 miles west. He was half frozen but alive, and so grateful for his nephew's rescue that he broke down crying when they reunited. But the real change happened with the men at Mercer Ranch. The story of what Lillian had done spread through the bunkhouse faster than fever. The quiet cook who kept her head down and never caused trouble had walked into a blizzard and pulled a dying child to safety. After that, when they looked at her, Lillian saw something different in their eyes. Respect. Real respect. And Wade Mercer started looking at her like she was the most interesting puzzle he'd ever encountered, one he was determined to solve. The change didn't happen all at once. It came in small moments that accumulated like snow on a roof, invisible, until suddenly the weight of it changed everything. 3 days after the storm, Frank approached Lillian in the kitchen while she was kneading bread dough. He stood in the doorway for a full minute, hat in his hands, before she noticed him. Something you need, Frank? Ma'am, I wanted to. That is, I heard what you did for that boy. He twisted his hat brim. That took guts, real guts. And I wanted you to know that if you ever need anything at all, you just ask. Lillian's hand stilled in the dough. That's kind of you. Ain't kindness, it's respect. Frank met her eyes. You're one of us now, Miss Lillian. That's all I came to say. He left before she could respond, but his words stayed with her all morning. One of us. She'd never been one of anything before, except one of the people the town wanted to forget. Pete came by that afternoon with a rabbit he'd snared. Thought you might want this for stew, he offered, looking almost shy. Caught 2, and I know you've been working miracles with what we got in the pantry. By evening, someone had fixed the loose board on her door that she'd mentioned once in passing. She hadn't asked anyone to repair it. They'd just done it. The men were claiming her, protecting her, treating her like she belonged. It was the most terrifying, wonderful thing Lillian had ever experienced. Wade noticed the shift too. She caught him watching from the main house porch one morning as the men lined up for breakfast, laughing at something Tommy had said, treating Lillian like she was part of their rough fraternity instead of an outsider they tolerated. When their eyes met across the yard, Wade nodded once, a gesture that might have meant approval or recognition or something else entirely. Lillian turned back to her kitchen before she could figure out which. The days grew longer as February pushed toward March. The worst of winter was breaking, though the nights still froze hard and snow still fell more often than not. Lillian's rhythm with the ranch had become second nature. She knew without checking that Charlie would want extra coffee, that Pete would show up early hoping for leftover biscuits, that Frank would need his stew thick because he was heading out to the far pasture and wouldn't eat again until dinner. She learned the ranch itself, too, learned which building was which, where the cattle sheltered during storms, how Wade organized the work crews. Mercer Ranch ran like a clock because Wade Mercer built it that way. Every man knew his job, every task had its time, every piece fit together into something larger than the sum of its parts. Lillian understood that impulse. A kitchen was the same way. Everything had its place, its purpose, its proper moment. "You're quiet today," Wade observed one evening as they washed dishes. He'd made it a habit now, staying after dinner to help clean up. The men had stopped commenting on it, but Lillian saw their knowing glances. "Just thinking." "About?" "How different this is from my cabin." She dried a plate carefully, set it on the stack. "Back there, I could go days without speaking to anyone. Here, I'm never alone." "You miss the quiet?" "Sometimes." She paused, considering. "But mostly no. Turns out loneliness is quieter than I thought, and louder somehow at the same time." Wade was silent for a moment, his hands still in the wash basin. "I know what you mean. Built this ranch after my wife died. Kept myself so busy I didn't have time to think. Filled it with men and cattle and work until there wasn't room for quiet anymore." It was the first time he'd mentioned a wife. Lillian felt something shift in her understanding of him. "How long ago?" 7 years this spring. Fever took her, same one that took half the county that year." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his hands had tightened on the pot he was scrubbing. "We'd only been married 2 years. Barely had time to figure out how to be married before she was gone." "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." Wade rinsed the pot and handed it to her. "But that's why I understand about the quiet. Sometimes being alone is easier than being around people who remind you of what you lost." "Is that why you never remarried? Everyone says you're the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties." Wade snorted. "Everyone talks too much. And no, that's not why. I just never found anyone who fit. Ranch life isn't easy. It takes a certain kind of person to love it here. The isolation, the hard work, the way winter can trap you for weeks at a time." He glanced at her. "Not everyone can handle it. But you think I can. I think you already are." The words settled between them, heavier than they should have been. Lillian focused on drying dishes, trying to ignore the way her heart had started beating faster. "The 6 weeks are almost up," she said quietly. 3 weeks left, by my count." "I'm aware." "Have you found someone to replace me? After?" Wade set down the dish he'd been washing and turned to face her fully. "I don't want to replace you, Lillian. I want you to stay. As the cook. As whatever you want to be. Cook, kitchen manager, someone who runs this whole operation if you've got a mind to. The men respect you. The ranch runs smoother with you here. And I—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. "I'd like you to stay. Permanent. At whatever wage seems fair to you." Lillian's throat went tight. "Wade, I appreciate the offer, but you need to understand something. If I stay here permanently, people are going to talk. A single woman living on a ranch full of men? The town can rot for all I care. When have you ever known me to give a damn what people in Redemption Flats think? You have a reputation to maintain, a business to run. And both of those things will be better with you here than without you." Wade's voice was firm. "I'm not asking you to do anything improper. You'd have your own quarters, same as now. Everything above board. But this ranch needs you, Lillian. I need you." The last 3 words hung in the air like smoke. Lillian couldn't look at him, couldn't process what he was saying, what it might mean beyond the simple business transaction he was describing. "Can I think about it?" "Of course you can. Take all the time you need." Wade went back to the dishes. "Just know that the offer stands. Whatever you decide." That night, lying in her small room with the wind rattling her window, Lillian tried to imagine going back to her cabin by the creek. Tried to picture herself alone again, baking bread for the mercantile, scraping by on the edge of poverty and pity. The image wouldn't come into focus anymore. That life felt like it belonged to someone else, someone smaller and sadder than who she was becoming. But staying meant risk, meant opening herself up to scrutiny and judgment, to the possibility that Wade's offer was just practicality and she was reading more into it than existed. Meant admitting that she'd started to care about this place, these people, this life in a way that felt dangerous. Meant admitting that when Wade looked at her with those gray eyes, something in her chest caught fire. She fell asleep without answers and woke to Tommy pounding on her door. Miss Lillian, wake up! Something's wrong with the cattle." She stumbled out of bed, grabbed her robe, and found Tommy in the kitchen looking panicked. "What happened?" "Don't know exactly. Wade sent me to get you. Said to bring hot water and clean cloth. Lots of it." Lillian's mind immediately went to injury, infection, something that needed tending. She got the kitchen stove roaring, set every pot she had to boiling, and gathered clean towels while Tommy paced anxiously. "Where are they?" "North pasture. One of the heifers is in trouble. Wade says it's a difficult birth and we might lose her if we can't—" He broke off, looking young and scared. Lillian had grown up on a farm. She'd seen difficult births before, knew how quickly they could turn fatal. "Help me carry this," she ordered, loading supplies into a basket. "And saddle me a horse, fastest one you've got." "You can ride?" "I can stay on a horse's back long enough to get where I'm going. Move." 20 minutes later, she was bouncing along on a mare that seemed to sense her inexperience and was taking shameless advantage of it. But they made it to the north pasture where Wade and 3 other men had gathered around a heifer lying on her side in the snow. Lillian dismounted clumsily and hurried over with her supplies. "What do you need me to do?" Wade looked up, and she saw the relief flash across his face. "Clean water, hot if you've got it, and those towels. Frank's got his hands inside trying to turn the calf, but if we don't get it positioned right soon, we'll lose them both." "How long has she been laboring?" "Since midnight. 6 hours now." "Too long." Lillian knew that without being told. She'd seen a cow die this way once, years ago. Her father hadn't been able to save either mother or calf. But Frank was good at this. She could tell by the way he worked, careful and methodical despite the urgency. She knelt in the snow beside him, ready with water and towels, doing what she could to help. "There," Frank muttered. "I've got it. One more push, girl. Come on now." The heifer bellowed, a sound of pure exhaustion and pain. Frank pulled steadily, and suddenly there was a calf in his arms, wet and steaming in the cold air. But it wasn't moving. "Not breathing," Frank said tersely. Come on, come on!" He rubbed the calf vigorously with one of Lillian's towels, trying to stimulate breathing. Nothing happened. Without thinking, Lillian grabbed the calf's head, cleared its mouth and nose of mucus, and blew hard into its nostrils. Once, twice, 3 times. The calf jerked, coughed, and drew a shuddering breath. "Sweet mercy," one of the men breathed. The calf breathed again, stronger this time. Its eyes opened. The heifer, exhausted but alive, turned her head to nose at her baby. Lillian sat back in the snow, her hands shaking, her robe soaked and filthy. Wade was staring at her. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My father. He tried it once with a stillborn lamb. Didn't work that time, but I remembered how he did it. You saved that calf's life. Frank did the hard part. I just helped it remember how to breathe. But the men were looking at her like she'd performed a miracle, like she was something more than just the cook who made good biscuits." Wade reached down and pulled her to her feet. His hands were warm despite the cold, and he didn't let go immediately. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That heifer is one of my best. I would have hated to lose her." "Then I'm glad I could help." They rode back to the ranch together, Wade leading her inexperienced mare since Lillian was too exhausted to manage it herself. The sun was coming up, turning the snow pink and gold. You fit here, Wade said suddenly. In case you were wondering, you fit. Lillian didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. But something warm bloomed in her chest and stayed there all through breakfast, all through the morning's work, all through the day. The men's attitude toward her continued to shift in ways both subtle and profound. They started asking her opinion on things beyond cooking, what she thought about the weather, whether they should move the cattle to the east pasture or the west, if she'd heard any news from town. They deferred to her about mealtimes and menu planning without question. When supplies ran low, they asked what she needed before Wade did. She'd become essential, not just useful, but actually essential to the functioning of Mercer Ranch. It was the strangest, most validating feeling of her life. "You're smiling," Tommy observed one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. "You smile a lot more now than when you first got here." "Do I?" "Yes, ma'am. First few weeks, you barely looked up from your work. Now you're different. Lighter, somehow." Lillian considered that. "I suppose I feel lighter, like I'm not carrying something as heavy as I used to." "What were you carrying?" "Shame, mostly." The admission came easier than she expected. "Spent so long believing I was worthless because of how I looked. Hard to shake that, even when people start treating you better." Tommy was quiet for a moment, chopping carrots with the careful precision she'd taught him. "For what it's worth, Miss Lillian, I never thought you were worthless. Little scared of you at first, maybe, but never worthless." "Scared of me? Why?" He grinned. "You got this look you give sometimes when someone's being stupid, like you're calculating exactly how much effort they're worth. It's terrifying." Despite herself, Lillian laughed. "I'll try to be less terrifying." "Don't. I like you better scary." The easy camaraderie between them felt precious. Tommy had become something like a younger brother, and she'd become his unlikely mentor. She taught him cooking. He taught her about horses and cattle and which men to avoid when they were in a mood. It was friendship, real friendship. Lillian had almost forgotten what that felt like. That evening, after the men had cleared out, and Wade had taken his usual position at the wash basin, Lillian finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her. "Why did you really come to my cabin that night?" Wade's hand stilled in the soapy water. "I told you, my cook was sick." "You told me I was your 8th choice, but you never told me why you kept asking until you got to me. Why not just have the men cook for themselves, or hire someone from another town?" "You want the truth?" "I do." Wade rinsed his hands and dried them carefully before answering. "I heard about you from the mercantile owner. He mentioned you'd worked in his kitchen years back, said you were the best baker he'd ever seen, but his wife made him let you go because customers complained." "Complained about what?" "About having to look at you while they ate." The words were brutal in their honesty. Lillian flinched. "I'm sorry," Wade said quickly. "That was cruel, but you asked for truth, and that's what he told me, and it made me angry. The idea that someone that good at their work was being punished for something that had nothing to do with their skill." He paused. "I've spent my whole life being judged for what I am instead of who I am. My father was a drunk who lost everything he owned. People assumed I'd be the same. Took me 20 years to build this ranch and prove them wrong." "But you did prove them wrong." "Because someone gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. Old rancher named Samuel Webb took me on when I was 16, taught me everything about cattle and land management. Died 5 years later and left me enough money to start this place." Wade met her eyes. "I figured maybe you deserved a chance too. Maybe you'd prove everyone wrong the same way I did." Lillian's throat was tight. "And have I?" "Every single day." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them seemed willing to name. Then Wade cleared his throat and went back to the dishes. 3 weeks left on our agreement," he said. "But the offer stands, Lillian. Stay. Make this permanent. You'll never have to go back to that cabin again. People will talk. Let them talk. We know the truth. That's what matters." "Is it?" Lillian dried a plate with more force than necessary. "You live in the main house, Wade. You don't hear what gets said in town, how people already whisper about the fat cook at Mercer Ranch, how they're probably placing bets on how long before you realize your mistake and send me back where I came from." "I don't give a damn what they say." But I do. The words burst out of her, surprising them both. I know I shouldn't. I know it's stupid to care what cruel people think. But I've spent my whole life being that joke, Wade. The cautionary tale. The girl mothers point to when they want to scare their daughters into eating less. And maybe I can ignore it here, where your men respect me and I have work that matters. But the moment I go to town, the moment anyone from Redemption Flat sees me, I'm right back to being worthless. Wade set down the pot he'd been washing and turned to face her fully. You think I don't understand that? You think I don't know what it's like to have people write you off before you ever open your mouth? My father's reputation followed me for 15 years, still does in some places. People see the name Mercer and assume I'm one bad month from drinking myself to death and losing everything. That's different. It's not different. It's the exact same thing. People deciding who you are based on something you can't control. The difference is, I stopped letting them define me, and you need to do the same. Easy for you to say. You're a man, a successful one. Society gives you room to fail and rebuild. I'm a fat woman with no family and no prospects. Society gives me nothing. Then take it anyway. Wade's voice was fierce. Build something they can't ignore. Become so good at what you do that they have to respect you whether they want to or not. You've already started. The men here see your worth. I see your worth. The only person who still seems to doubt it is you. Lillian wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the ways he was wrong, all the ways the world worked differently for her than it did for him. But standing there in her kitchen with soap suds on her hands and Wade Mercer looking at her like she was worth fighting for, the arguments wouldn't come. I'll think about it, she said finally. The offer to stay. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. But that night, lying in bed, Lillian couldn't stop thinking about the way Wade had looked at her. Not with pity or awkwardness or the careful politeness people used when they were trying not to stare. He'd looked at her with frustration and challenge and something that might have been hope, like he actually cared whether she stayed or left. Like it mattered to him personally, not just professionally. That was dangerous territory. Lillian had learned long ago not to mistake kindness for interest, not to read too much into a man's attention. Wade Mercer was a good employer who valued her work. That was all. Anything else was her own foolish heart inventing stories. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the way his hands had steadied her after the calf's birth, the way he stayed to help with dishes every night when he could have been doing 100 other things, the way he defended her worth like it was a fact as immutable as gravity. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and full of dreams she couldn't quite remember in the morning. The weeks continued their slide toward spring. The worst of winter was definitely breaking now. Whole days where the temperature rose above freezing, where you could see patches of brown earth showing through the snow. The cattle were getting restless, ready for fresh grass. The men were getting restless too, talking about the spring drive and all the work that would come with it. Lillian found herself learning the rhythm of the ranching year, understanding how everything built toward certain crucial moments. Spring calving, summer grazing, fall roundup, winter survival. It was a cycle as reliable as seasons, and she was beginning to see where her work fit into it. She was beginning to see where she fit into it. Miss Lillian? Pete appeared in the kitchen doorway one afternoon, hat in hand. Got a favor to ask, if you don't mind. What do you need? Well, it's my sister's birthday next week. She's turning 16, and Ma's planning a party. I was wondering if maybe you could teach me how to make that apple cake you did last month. Thought I'd surprise her with it. Lillian smiled. You want to learn to bake? Don't tell the other men. I'll never hear the end of it. Your secret's safe with me. Come by tomorrow after dinner. We'll work on it together. Pete's face lit up. Thank you, ma'am. Really. My sister, she's been having a hard time since Pa died. Thought maybe something special would help. After he left, Tommy looked up from the bread dough he was kneading. That was nice of you. It's just a cake. It's not just a cake. It's Pete being able to show his sister he cares. That matters. Lillian supposed it did. She'd been so focused on surviving, on just getting through each day, that she'd forgotten how small kindnesses could matter, how teaching someone to bake a cake could mean more than the cake itself. That evening, Wade came into the kitchen earlier than usual. He had a bundle under his arm. Brought you something, he said, setting it on the work table. Lillian unwrapped it carefully and found fabric. Good fabric, heavy wool in a deep blue color, enough for a dress with some left over. Wait, I can't accept this. Yes, you can. Consider it a bonus. You've been wearing the same two dresses since you got here, and they're both getting worn. Thought you might want something new. This must have cost. I know what it cost, and it's worth it. He met her eyes. You've earned it, Lillian. Let yourself have something nice. She ran her fingers over the wool, soft and good quality. When was the last time she'd had a new dress? When was the last time anyone had given her something just because they thought she deserved it? Thank you, she said quietly. You're welcome. Wade hesitated, then added, There's a social in town next month, spring dance. I usually don't go, but I was thinking maybe this year I would, if you wanted to come with me. Lillian's head snapped up. To the dance? As my guest. Not as my cook, just as someone I'd like to have with me. Her heart was pounding. Wade, if we show up together, people will talk. Let them talk. They'll say cruel things about me, about you for being seen with me. I don't care what they say. He took a step closer. Lillian, I'm asking you to a dance, not proposing marriage. Just one evening where maybe we could be two people who enjoy each other's company instead of employer and employee. Is that really so impossible? It should have been impossible. Every rule of society said so. But standing in her kitchen with the blue fabric under her hands and Wade Mercer looking at her like she was someone worth dancing with, Lillian found herself wanting to say yes, wanting it so badly it scared her. I'll think about it, she whispered. Wade nodded, not pushing. That's fair. Offer stands, though, if you change your mind. After he left, Lillian held the blue wool against her chest and let herself imagine it for just a moment. Walking into that dance on Wade Mercer's arm, dancing with him in front of everyone who'd ever mocked her or dismissed her or treated her like she wasn't worth their time. It was a fantasy, of course, a beautiful, impossible fantasy. But for the first time in her life, Lillian let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, impossible things could sometimes come true. The dress took her 3 weeks to finish. Lillian worked on it in the evenings after the kitchen was clean, her fingers moving through the familiar motions of measuring and cutting and stitching. She hadn't sewn anything for herself in years. There'd been no point when fabric was expensive and her body seemed to change shape with the seasons. But the blue wool Wade had given her was generous enough that she didn't have to scrimp, didn't have to make compromises. She could make something beautiful. Tommy caught her working on it one night when he came back to retrieve a hat he'd forgotten. That's real pretty, Miss Lillian, he said, studying the partially assembled bodice. For the spring dance? Maybe. I haven't decided if I'm going yet. You should go. Wade asked you, didn't he? Lillian's hand stilled on the fabric. How did you know that? Tommy had the grace to look embarrassed. The men talk. We all think you should say yes. You've been discussing this, all of you? Not in a bad way. Just, we all like Wade, and we all like you. And it seems like maybe you like each other, so why not go to a dance together? He shrugged like it was the simplest thing in the world. If only it were that simple. Tommy, you're young, so maybe you don't understand how this works. Wade Mercer is a respected rancher, a man of standing. If he shows up at that dance with me, people will talk. They'll assume things, say cruel things, maybe even about him. So, let them talk. Wade spent his whole life not caring what people think. Why should he start now? Because reputations matter in business. He needs the respect of other ranchers, of the bank, of the buyers who come through looking for cattle. One wrong move and he could lose that. Tommy crossed his arms, looking suddenly older than his 19 years. Miss Lillian, with respect, I think you're wrong. You know what the men were saying about Wade before you got here? That he was turning into a hermit, that he worked himself half to death and never smiled and was probably going to end up alone and bitter. And you know what they say now? That the ranch feels like a home again, that Wade's different, lighter, happier. They say that's because of you. Lillian's throat went tight. They say that? Every one of them. Even Frank. And he never says anything nice about anybody. Tommy moved toward the door, then paused. You saved that boy in the blizzard. You saved that calf. You feed us meals that make us feel human instead of just fed. Maybe it's time you let yourself be saved too. He left before she could respond, leaving Lillian alone with the blue dress and thoughts that wouldn't settle. The next morning, Wade appeared in the kitchen before breakfast with news that made Lillian's stomach drop. "We've got visitors coming today. My former business partner and his wife down from Cheyenne. They'll be staying through the weekend." "How many for meals?" "Just the two of them. But Helena, that's his wife. She's particular about things. Used to run in society circles back east before she married Drake." Wade's expression was carefully neutral. "I wanted to warn you, she can be, difficult." Difficult turned out to be a spectacular understatement. Helena Drake arrived at noon in a carriage that probably cost more than Lillian's cabin, dressed in a traveling suit that was the height of fashion and clearly knew it. She was beautiful in the way rich women often were, perfectly groomed, expertly corseted, with blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls that must have taken her maid hours to create. She took one look at the ranch and wrinkled her nose like she smelled something foul. Her husband, Marcus Drake, was a jovial man in his 50s who seemed genuinely pleased to see Wade. "Mercer, looking well, looking well. Ranch seems to be thriving. Can't complain, cattle are healthy, men are working hard. Been a good year." "Glad to hear it. Helena insisted we stop by on our way to Denver. You remember my wife?" "Of course, Mrs. Drake, welcome to Mercer Ranch." Helena offered Wade her hand like she expected him to kiss it. Wade shook it briefly instead, and Lillian saw irritation flash across the woman's perfect features. "Wade, darling, I must say I'm surprised you're still buried out here in the wilderness. A man of your talents could do so much better in a proper city." "I like the wilderness. Suits me." "Clearly." Helena's eyes swept the ranch buildings with obvious disdain. "Though I had hoped you might have reconsidered our previous arrangement by now." Something passed between them, some history Lillian couldn't read. Wade's expression hardened slightly. "That arrangement ended 3 years ago, Helena. We both moved on." "Did we?" Helena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose we did. And who is this?" She'd spotted Lillian standing in the kitchen doorway, and her gaze was sharp as broken glass. "Miss Hart, my cook. Lillian, this is Mr. and Mrs. Drake." Lillian nodded politely, trying to ignore the way Helena's eyes traveled over her body with unconcealed disgust. "Your cook? How rustic." Helena turned back to Wade. "Surely you could hire someone more presentable? First impressions matter, Wade, even out here. Miss Hart's cooking speaks for itself. My men have never eaten better." "I'm sure. Though one does wonder about the expense of feeding someone so substantial." The insult was delivered with a smile, wrapped in enough politeness that calling it out would seem like overreaction, but Lillian felt it land like a physical blow. Wade's jaw tightened. "I'll have someone show you to your rooms. Dinner is at 6. As the Drakes followed one of the ranch hands toward the guest quarters in the main house, Wade turned to Lillian. She was already retreating into her kitchen, not wanting him to see her face. "Lillian, it's fine. I need to start dinner anyway." "It's not fine. Helena had no right to speak to you that way." "She's your guest. I'm your employee. She has every right." Lillian kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. "What would you like me to prepare for dinner?" Wade looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have warned him off. "Whatever you think best. You've never steered me wrong." After he left, Lillian stood in her kitchen and let herself shake for exactly 1 minute. Then she got to work. If Helena Drake wanted to judge her cooking, Lillian would give her something worth judging. She prepared a meal that would have done a fine restaurant proud. Roasted beef with herb crust, potatoes creamed with butter and cheese, carrots glazed with honey, fresh bread with a crust that crackled when you cut it, and an apple tart that made the whole kitchen smell like autumn. The regular ranch hands ate in the bunkhouse that night, giving the main house dining room to Wade and his guests. Lillian served the meal herself, trying to be invisible, trying not to notice the way Helena watched her every movement with that calculating gaze. "This is actually quite good," Helena admitted, cutting into her beef. "I'm surprised. You don't see cooking of this quality outside of major cities." "Miss Hart trained in professional kitchens," Wade said, which was a generous interpretation of Lillian's 3 years at the Mercantile, but she appreciated the defense. "How fascinating. And where was that? San Francisco? New York?" Here in Wyoming, actually. Started learning from my mother when I was young. Helena's smile was poisonous. How quaint. Self-taught frontier cooking. Wade, you always did have such democratic tastes. Marcus Drake cleared his throat. The food really is excellent, Miss Hart. My compliments. Thank you, sir. Lillian escaped back to the kitchen as quickly as she could, but she could still hear their conversation through the door she'd left slightly ajar. Really, Wade, I know you value practicality over appearances, but that woman is hardly suitable for a ranch of this standing. What must people think? I don't care what people think, Helena. I never have. That's always been your problem, darling. You never understood the importance of perception in business. Image matters. Performance matters. Results matter. Everything else is noise. Is it? Because I notice you're still alone out here, running this ranch with no wife, no family, no future beyond the next cattle season. When we were engaged, I tried to show you there was more to life than dirt and cows. The words hit Lillian like a punch. Engaged. Wade and Helena had been engaged. That was a long time ago, Wade said, his voice dangerously quiet. And it ended for good reasons. Did it? Or did you just let your stubborn pride get in the way of something that could have been wonderful? Helena's voice had gone soft, calculated. I made a mistake marrying Marcus. We both know that. He's a good man, but he's not you. I've regretted my choice every day for 3 years. Lillian shouldn't be listening to this. She should close the door, should give them privacy, should not be hearing Helena Drake try to seduce her former fiancé while her current husband sat right there at the table, but she couldn't move. Helena, stop! Wade's chair scraped back. You're married. Happily or not, you're married. And I've moved on. Have you? To what? This ranch? These men? That fat cook you're so defensive about? That's enough. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've buried yourself out here rather than face the fact that you're alone. That you've always been alone because you're too proud to accept help, too stubborn to let anyone in. Helena's voice dropped to something intimate. I could help you, Wade. We could fix this. Marcus and I have an understanding. He has his interests. I have mine. You and I could... No. Wade's voice was flat, final. We couldn't. What we had died years ago, and I'm not interested in resurrecting it. You made your choice when you left for Marcus's money. I made mine when I built this ranch. We're done, Helena. We've been done. Because of her? That cook? Because of me. Because I finally figured out what I actually want, and it's not you. Lillian heard footsteps, heard Wade walking toward the kitchen. She stumbled back from the door, trying to look busy at the stove, trying to pretend she hadn't heard every word. Wade pushed through the door and stopped when he saw her face. You heard. It wasn't a question. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I should have told you about Helena before she got here. Should have warned you properly. He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. We were engaged 4 years ago. She broke it off to marry Drake for his money and connections. I thought I was past caring. Guess I was wrong. She wants you back. She wants what she can't have. It's different. Wade moved closer. Lillian, whatever she said about you was probably true. I am fat. I am self-taught. I'm not suitable for a ranch of this standing, at least not according to people like her. People like her don't matter. They do, though. They matter to business, to reputation, to nothing that's real. Wade's voice was fierce. Helena Drake lives in a world of appearances and manipulation and using people like chess pieces. I spent a year engaged to her, and I was miserable every single day because I was trying to be someone I'm not. Someone polished and refined and acceptable to her society friends. Maybe that's what you need, though. Someone who can help you move in those circles, make the connections that grow a business. Or maybe what I need is someone who sees me as I actually am and doesn't try to change it. Wade took another step closer. Someone who works beside me instead of trying to manage me. Someone who makes this ranch feel like a home instead of just a business. Lillian's heart was pounding. Wade, I'm saying this wrong, but Lillian, these past few weeks with you here, I've been happier than I've been in years. The men see it. Hell, I see it. And it's not because you're a good cook, though you are. It's because you fit here. You fit with me. I don't fit anywhere. I never have. You fit here, he repeated, and there was such certainty in his voice that Lillian almost believed him. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Then the kitchen door swung open and Helena swept in, her expression cold. How domestic. The rancher and his cook having a private moment. Her smile was sharp. Wade, darling, I hope you're not making the mistake of confusing gratitude with something deeper. It would be cruel to give her false hope. Helena, get out of my kitchen. Your kitchen? I thought it was hers. Helena turned to Lillian, her eyes glittering. Tell me, Miss Hart, do you really think a man like Wade could want someone like you? Or are you simply taking advantage of his kind nature and desperation for help? Mrs. Drake, I think you should go. Lillian's voice was steady, despite the trembling in her hands. Should I? But I'm only saying what everyone in 3 counties is already thinking. That poor Wade Mercer stuck with that enormous woman because he couldn't find anyone else willing to live out here. How charitable of him, really, to give you employment when no one else would. That's enough. Wade's voice cracked like a whip. Get out. Now. I'm only being honest, Wade. Someone has to be. You can't seriously be considering anything with her beyond employment. The scandal alone would... I said get out. Helena's expression hardened. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when this all falls apart. When people start talking, when your business partners start wondering about your judgment, when you realize you've tied yourself to someone who will only drag you down, don't come crying to me. She swept out of the kitchen, leaving a silence so thick Lillian could barely breathe through it. I'm sorry, Wade said quietly. I'm so damn sorry. She's right, though. Lillian's voice came out small. People will talk, are talking, probably, about you keeping me here, about what it means. Let them talk. You keep saying that like it doesn't matter, but it does, Wade. Maybe not to you, but to me it does. I've spent my whole life being the joke, the cautionary tale. I can't. I won't be that for you, too. You're not a joke, Lillian. You're the furthest thing from it. Then what am I? The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. What am I to you, Wade? Your cook? Your charity case? The woman you defend because it's the right thing to do? I need to know because I can't keep doing this. Can't keep wondering if there's something more here or if I'm just fooling myself again. Wade closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to cup her face, gentle despite their calluses. You're the woman I want, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. The woman I've wanted for weeks now but didn't know how to tell you. You're the person who makes me laugh at breakfast, and who I look for first when I come in from the fields. You're the one I think about when I should be thinking about cattle counts and fence repairs. You're not my cook, Lillian. You're the woman I'm falling in love with. Lillian's breath caught. You can't mean that. I do mean it. And I know it's crazy. I know it's fast. I know every rule says we shouldn't, but I don't care. I stopped caring about rules the night you walked out into a blizzard to save a child you didn't know. I stopped caring about what people think when I watched you bring a dead calf back to life with nothing but determination and memory. I want you, Lillian Hart, not despite who you are, but because of it. Wade, I'm not what men want. I'm not beautiful or refined or you're wrong. His thumbs brushed her cheeks. You're brave and strong and so beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. And I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this way. Then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, giving her room to pull away. But Lillian had spent her whole life pulling away, protecting herself, expecting rejection. For once, just once, she wanted to be brave enough to reach for something she wanted. She kissed him back. Wade made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, and suddenly the kiss was deeper, more urgent. His hands slid into her hair, dislodging pins, and Lillian didn't care. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had started spinning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. Come to the dance with me, he said. Let me show the whole damn town that you're mine and I'm yours, and anyone who has a problem with it can go to hell. Wade, I know it's asking a lot. I know it'll be hard. But I want to walk into that room with you on my arm. Want to dance with you where everyone can see. Want to stop hiding what I feel. Lillian's heart was a wild thing in her chest. They'll be cruel. Probably. Can you stand it if I'm standing with you? Could she? Could she walk into that dance hall knowing people would whisper and judge and mock? Could she endure their cruelty if it meant one evening of being the woman Wade Mercer chose? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll go with you. Wade's smile was like sunrise. He kissed her again, softer this time, and Lillian felt something in her chest unlock. Some door she'd kept bolted shut for 20 years finally swinging open. The Drakes left the next morning. Helena didn't say goodbye to Lillian, but the look she gave Wade spoke volumes. It was a look that said, this isn't over, that promised consequences, that warned of trouble coming. Lillian tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the blue dress she was finishing, on the dance that was now just 2 weeks away, on the way Wade looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. But Helena's words kept echoing in her head, about scandal, about reputation, about dragging Wade down. You're quiet today, Tommy observed as they prepared lunch together. Everything okay? Just thinking. About the dance? About whether going is a mistake. Tommy set down his knife. Miss Lillian, can I tell you something? My ma, she was a big woman, bigger than you even, and she married my pa when she was 18 and he loved her until the day he died. Used to tell her she was the most beautiful woman in 3 states. And you know what? He meant it. Because he saw who she was, not just what she looked like. That's different. Is it? Seems to me Wade sees you the same way my pa saw ma. Seems to me you're the one who can't see it. Maybe Tommy was right. Maybe Lillian was so used to being dismissed that she couldn't recognize genuine affection when it was offered. Maybe she was sabotaging her own happiness because accepting it felt too dangerous, too impossible. The days rushed toward the dance with alarming speed. Lillian finished the blue dress and tried it on in private, shocked by how well it fit, how the color brought out the warmth in her skin. She looked like someone who mattered, someone worth looking at. She practiced her hair 3 different ways before settling on something simple, pulled back but not severe, with a few soft curls around her face. She had no jewelry except her mother's simple silver locket, but that would have to be enough. The night before the dance, Frank knocked on her kitchen door after dinner. Got something for you, Miss Lillian? He held out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a shawl, delicate and beautiful, knitted from soft cream-colored wool. Frank, this is... My wife made it years ago. She passed before she could wear it much. Thought maybe you could use it tomorrow night. Gets cold after sunset, even in spring. Lillian's eyes burned. I can't take this. Sure you can. Sarah would have liked you, would have wanted you to have it. Frank shifted uncomfortably. You've been good to us, Miss Lillian. Good to this whole ranch. You deserve a nice evening. Don't let anyone make you think different. After he left, Lillian held the shawl and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that these rough cowboys had somehow become her family, that they were rooting for her, protecting her, giving her their dead wives' shawls because they wanted her to feel beautiful. She'd spent so long believing she was alone. Turns out she'd just been looking in the wrong places. The day of the dance dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift. Lillian worked through her morning routine in a daze, her mind already jumping ahead to evening. The men were in high spirits, teasing each other about their own plans for the dance, making exaggerated bets about who would dance with whom. You nervous, Miss Lillian? Pete asked as he helped her carry water. Terrified. Don't be. You're going to be the prettiest woman there. Lillian laughed despite herself. Pete, you're sweet, but you don't have to lie. Ain't lying. You got that glow about you. That's what pretty really is. Not the face, but the glow. My ma always said so. Maybe he was right. Maybe beauty was more than bone structure and waist measurements. Maybe it was the way you carried yourself. The light in your eyes when you looked at someone you loved. Wade came to collect her at sunset, driving a polished buggy she'd never seen before. He was dressed in his good suit, his hair neatly combed, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him look before. You ready? he asked. Lillian stepped out of her kitchen in the blue dress with Frank's shawl around her shoulders, her hair arranged as carefully as she could manage, her hands shaking. Wade stared at her like he'd forgotten how to speak. You look... He swallowed hard. Lillian, you're beautiful. You don't have to... I'm not being polite. I'm telling you the truth. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Something in Lillian's chest cracked open. She let Wade help her into the buggy, let him tuck the shawl around her shoulders, let herself believe just for tonight that maybe she was beautiful, that maybe she deserved this. The ride to town was quiet, both of them too nervous to talk much. But Wade held her hand, and that was enough. The dance hall was lit up like a celebration, music already spilling out into the street. Couples were arriving, dressed in their best, laughing and calling to each other. Through the windows, Lillian could see the dancers already forming sets, the fiddler tuning up. This was it, the moment she'd been both anticipating and dreading. Wade helped her down from the buggy and offered his arm. You can still change your mind. I'll take you back, no questions asked. No, Lillian lifted her chin. I want to do this. I want to walk in there with you. Wade smiled, and in that moment, Lillian saw everything she needed to see. Pride, affection, certainty. They walked through the door together, and the music didn't stop, but several conversations did. Heads turned, whispers started. Lillian felt every eye, felt the weight of judgment settling over her like a physical thing. Then Wade pulled her onto the dance floor, his hand firm at her waist, and suddenly none of it mattered. Just look at me, he murmured. Forget everyone else, just us. So Lillian looked at Wade, and they danced. They danced 3 sets before Wade led her off the floor, both of them breathless and smiling. Lillian's cheeks hurt from grinning. Her feet ached in shoes she wasn't used to wearing, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this alive. Need some air? Wade asked, and she nodded gratefully. They slipped out the side door into the cool spring evening. Other couples had the same idea, shadowy figures talking quietly in pairs, stealing moments of privacy away from the crowded hall. Wade found them a spot near the edge of the building where they could still hear the music but were away from the others. You're a good dancer, Lillian said, still catching her breath. I didn't know ranchers could dance like that. My mother insisted I learn, said a man who couldn't dance was a man who couldn't be trusted. Wade's smile was soft with memory. She died when I was 16, but some lessons stick. She would have been proud of you, of what you built. Maybe, or maybe she'd have told me I work too hard and don't smile enough. He tucked a loose curl behind Lillian's ear. She would have liked you, though. She always said the best people were the ones who'd been through hard times and came out kind anyway. Before Lillian could respond, a familiar voice cut through the evening air. Well, well, the rumors were true. Helena Drake emerged from the shadows, her husband nowhere in sight. She was dressed in a gown that probably cost more than most families earned in a year, emeralds glittering at her throat and wrists. She looked like money and power, and everything Lillian would never be. Helena? Wade's voice went flat. I thought you left for Denver. We did. Marcus had business to attend to, so I came back to visit some friends in town. Imagine my surprise when I heard Wade Mercer was bringing his cook to the spring dance. Helena's smile was poisonous. I had to see it for myself. You've seen it. Now leave us alone. In a moment. First, I think Miss Hart deserves to know what she's getting into. Helena turned to Lillian, her eyes glittering with malice. Did Wade tell you about the last woman he brought to this dance? 3 years ago, before he became such a hermit? Helena, don't. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. Beautiful girl, tiny waist, perfect manners. They danced all night, and everyone thought Wade had finally found himself a proper wife. Helena paused for effect. Then the next day, she told him she could never marry a man who smelled like cattle and lived so far from civilization. She married a banker from Cheyenne 6 months later. Wade's jaw was tight. That has nothing to do with, doesn't it? You have a pattern, Wade. You find women who need something from you, employment, rescue, validation, and you convince yourself it's love. But what happens when Miss Hart realizes she can do better? When she figures out she doesn't need you anymore? That's enough. Wade stepped between Helena and Lillian. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I know you, Wade Mercer. I know you're terrified of being alone, so you cling to anyone who shows you kindness. But this? Helena gestured at Lillian with barely concealed disgust. This is pathetic, even for you. She's using you for security, and you're using her to fill the empty space in that ranch house. Neither of you is being honest about what this really is. You're wrong. Lillian's voice came out stronger than she expected. You don't know anything about us. Helena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, sweetie, I know exactly what's happening here. You're clinging to the first man who's ever shown you a scrap of attention because you're so desperate to be wanted. And he's using you because you're convenient and grateful and won't challenge him the way a real partner would. It's sad, really. You need to leave. Wade's voice was dangerous now. Right now, before I forget you're a woman and Marcus's wife. Fine, I'll go. But do yourself a favor, Miss Hart. Helena leaned in close enough that Lillian could smell her expensive perfume. Look around this dance. See all those people staring at you. They're not admiring your dress. They're wondering what Wade could possibly see in someone like you. And deep down, you're wondering the same thing, aren't you? She swept away before Lillian could respond, leaving silence in her wake. Wade turned to Lillian, his face stricken. Don't listen to her. She's bitter and cruel, and she doesn't know what she's talking about. But the damage was done. Helena's words had found every insecurity Lillian had been trying to ignore, every doubt she'd been pushing down. She looked through the dance hall windows at the people inside, saw the way some of them were still watching, still whispering. Take me home, she said quietly. Please, I want to go home. Lillian, please, Wade. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Wade tried several times to start a conversation, but Lillian couldn't find words. Helena's accusations kept echoing in her head. You're using each other. Neither of you is being honest. They're wondering what Wade could possibly see in someone like you. When they reached the ranch, Lillian climbed down from the buggy before Wade could help her. Thank you for the evening, she said, formal as a stranger. I should get some sleep. Early morning tomorrow. Lillian, wait. Can we talk about what Helena said? There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about. She was trying to hurt you, trying to put doubts in your head about us. Maybe the doubts were already there. Lillian hugged Frank's shawl tighter around her shoulders. Maybe she just said out loud what I've been thinking all along. Wade's face went pale. You don't mean that. Don't I? Wade, be honest. If I wasn't your cook, if I hadn't been convenient and available and useful, would you have even looked at me twice? That's not fair. It's a simple question. If we'd met in town, if I was just another woman at that dance, would you have asked me to dance, or would you have looked right through me like everyone else does? Wade was silent for a long moment. I don't know how to answer that, because we didn't meet in town. We met because I needed help and you needed work, and everything that came after came from that. I can't separate who we are from how we met. That's what I thought. Lillian turned toward her kitchen. Good night, Wade. Lillian, please. Don't let Helena win. Don't let her poison what we have. What do we have exactly? A business arrangement that got complicated? A convenient romance that makes you feel less lonely? We have something real. Wade's voice was raw. I know it started as employer and employee, but it became more than that. It became a mistake. The word came out harsher than Lillian intended. We both got caught up in something that can't work. You needed someone to run your kitchen, and I needed to feel wanted. Helena was right about that much. She wasn't right about anything. Lillian, I love you. The words should have made everything better. Instead, they made it worse. You love what I do for you. You love how I make your ranch run smoothly and your men happy. But loving me, loving this, she gestured at her body. You can't love what everyone else sees as a joke. I see you, Lillian, the real you, not what anyone else sees. That's the problem, Wade. You see some version of me that you've built up in your head. The brave woman who saved the child, the cook who feeds your men, the person who fits into the empty spaces in your life. But what happens when you see me the way the rest of the world does? What happens when you're tired of defending me to people like Helena? Wade looked like she'd slapped him. You really think that little of me? You think I'd stop caring about you because of what other people say? I think you're human. And humans get tired of fighting eventually. She went into her kitchen and closed the door before Wade could respond, before she could see the hurt in his eyes, before she could take back the cruel words she'd just said. Inside, alone in the dark, Lillian let herself cry. She cried for the beautiful evening that had turned ugly, for the hope that had bloomed and died in the space of a few hours, for the love she'd been offered and was too scared to accept. She cried until she had no tears left, then sat in the dark and tried to figure out how she was going to face tomorrow. Morning came too soon, dragging Lillian from a fitful sleep into gray dawn. She moved through her routine mechanically, starting the coffee, mixing biscuit dough, slicing bacon. Her hands knew the work so well she didn't have to think about it, which was good because thinking hurt too much. The men filed in for breakfast subdued, none of them meeting her eyes. They knew something had happened. In a place as small as Mercer Ranch, there were no secrets. Wade didn't come to breakfast. Tommy helped her clean up in awkward silence. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. Miss Lillian, whatever happened last night, I don't want to talk about it. But, Tommy, please, just let it be. He nodded and went back to washing dishes, but his expression said he had plenty he wanted to say. Wade didn't come to lunch either. Frank mentioned he'd ridden out at dawn to check the fence lines in the far pasture and probably wouldn't be back until evening. Lillian told herself she was relieved, told herself she needed the space. She was lying. That afternoon, as Lillian was starting dinner preparations, Pete burst into the kitchen looking panicked. Miss Lillian, we got a problem. Charlie's sick, real sick, and so is Tom and young Danny. They're burning up with fever and can't keep nothing down. Lillian's professional instincts kicked in immediately. Show me. The bunkhouse smelled of sweat and sickness. 3 men were in their beds, faces flushed with fever, shivering despite the blankets piled on them. Lillian touched Charlie's forehead and felt heat radiating off him. How long have they been like this? Charlie started feeling bad last night. Tom and Danny got sick this morning. We thought maybe it was something they ate, but it's not food poisoning. This is fever. Lillian's mind raced through possibilities. Anyone else feeling poorly? Frank's complaining of a headache. Pete said his stomach's been off since breakfast. This was spreading. Whatever it was moving through the bunkhouse like wildfire. Right. Here's what we're going to do. Anyone who's sick stays in bed. Anyone who's starting to feel bad, I want to know immediately. Get me clean water, lots of it, and blankets. We need to keep them warm, but not too warm. Yes, ma'am. What about Wade? Should we send for him? No, he's too far out to reach quickly. We'll manage this ourselves. Lillian started organizing in her head. Who needed what? What supplies she had? What she'd need to make? Tommy, go to my kitchen and bring me the willow bark from the top shelf. Pete, I need you to ride to town and get the doctor. Tell him we have fever spreading through the bunkhouse and we need him now. What are you going to do? Keep them alive until help gets here. For the next several hours, Lillian moved between sick men with the efficiency of a field medic. She made broth from beef bones and herbs, forced liquid down throats that didn't want to swallow. She brewed willow bark tea for the fever, applied cool cloths to burning foreheads, changed sweat-soaked sheets. More men fell sick. By evening, 7 were down with fever, including Frank, who'd insisted he was fine until he collapsed during dinner preparation. The doctor arrived at sunset, a grizzled man named Patterson, who'd been practicing medicine on the frontier for 30 years. It's the fever that went through Denver last month, he confirmed after examining the patients. Not deadly if treated right, but it spreads fast and hits hard. You done good keeping them hydrated. That's what saves lives with this one. What else do they need? Exactly what you're already doing. Fluids, rest, willow bark for the fever, and pray. He looked at Lillian with something like respect. You got medical training? Just common sense and a good memory. Well, keep doing what you're doing. I'll check back tomorrow, but honestly, you don't need me. You're managing this fine on your own. After the doctor left, Lillian set up a rotation. The men who weren't sick yet would work in shifts, helping tend the ones who were. She'd stay with the sickest cases, the ones who needed constant monitoring. Tommy proved invaluable, following her instructions precisely, learning as he went. By midnight, they had a system working. Check temperatures every hour, force fluids every 2 hours, change bedding as needed, monitor breathing and consciousness. Lillian hadn't slept in 24 hours. Didn't matter. These men needed her. Charlie was the worst case. His fever spiked dangerously high around 2 in the morning, and for a terrifying half hour, Lillian thought they were going to lose him. She packed him in cool cloths, forced water down his throat, talked to him even though he was barely conscious. Come on, Charlie, you're tougher than this fever. You survived 30 winters on this frontier. You're not going down to a little sickness. Fight it, fight. His fever broke just before dawn, dropping so suddenly Lillian nearly cried with relief. He was still sick, still weak, but the immediate danger had passed. She found Tommy dozing in a chair beside Danny's bed and shook him gently awake. Go sleep properly. I can handle things for a few hours. You need sleep more than I do, Miss Lillian. You've been up for... I'm fine, go. After Tommy left, Lillian made her rounds again, checking temperatures, adjusting blankets, making notes on who was improving and who needed more attention. The sun was coming up, painting the bunkhouse in shades of gold, and she allowed herself one moment to stop and breathe. She'd done it. She'd kept them alive through the worst of it. The bunkhouse door opened and Wade walked in, still wearing yesterday's work clothes covered in trail dust. He took one look at Lillian, at her exhausted face, her stained apron, the dark circles under her eyes, and crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? Peter said there was sickness, but he didn't say, Lillian, have you slept at all? 7 men down with fever. It's the same one that went through Denver. Doctor came, confirmed it, said to keep doing what I'm doing. Her words came out flat, professional. Charlie spiked bad around 2, but his fever broke. The others are stable. We should be through the worst of it by tomorrow. Wade looked around the bunkhouse, seeing the organized chaos, the neat stacks of clean linens, the careful notes Lillian had made about each patient, the systematic way she'd arranged everything for maximum efficiency. You did this? All of it? Tommy helped, and the men who aren't sick, but mostly yes. Lillian, you should have sent for me. I would have come back. You were too far out. We handled it. She moved to Frank's bed to check his temperature. He's still running hot, but it's coming down. That's good. Wade grabbed her wrist gently, stopping her constant motion. Lillian, look at me. She didn't want to see whatever was in his eyes, but she looked anyway. You saved them, Wade said quietly. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't known what to do, we could have lost men. Good men. You saved them, Lillian. I just did what needed doing. You did what no one else could have done. You took charge of a crisis and handled it like you've been doing it your whole life. His thumb brushed across her wrist, over her racing pulse. You're incredible. Wade, don't. Not after last night, not after what I said. Especially after what you said, because you were wrong, Lillian, about all of it. You think I care about you because you're convenient? Look around. You're not convenient. You're difficult and stubborn, and you make me question everything I thought I knew about myself. You make me want to be better than I am. You're just saying that because I kept your men alive. I'm saying it because it's true, and because last night, after you went inside, I sat in that buggy and tried to imagine this ranch without you. Tried to picture going back to how things were before you came. And I couldn't do it, Lillian, because you're not just my cook. You're the reason I get up in the morning. You're the person I want to tell when something good happens. You're the one I want beside me when things go wrong. Lillian's eyes were burning, but she refused to cry. Helena said what bitter people always say when they see someone else finding happiness. She tried to poison what we have because she can't stand seeing me care about someone who isn't her. Wade's voice was fierce. But I don't care about her, Lillian. I haven't cared about her in years. The only woman I care about is you. Even though Don't say it. Don't repeat the lies people have told you about yourself. You're strong and brave and so damn beautiful it makes my chest hurt. You're the woman I want, Lillian Hart. Today, tomorrow, every day after. And if you can't see that, if you really believe I'm settling for you or using you or whatever Helena convinced you of, then I'll step back. But don't lie to yourself about why. Don't pretend it's because I don't care enough, because I care so much it terrifies me. Charlie stirred in his bed, mumbling something incoherent. Lillian automatically moved to check on him, but Wade kept hold of her wrist. "I need you to believe me," he said. "I need you to trust that what I feel is real." "I want to." The admission came out broken. "Wade, I want to believe you. But I've spent 20 years learning that people don't choose someone like me. They settle for me when they have no other options. And I can't. I can't be that for you. I can't be the woman you settle for because I'm here and available and useful. You're not listening. I'm not settling. I'm choosing. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks the same." Wade let go of her wrist and stepped back, and for a moment Lillian thought he was giving up, thought he was finally seeing sense and realizing she was right. Instead, he went to the bunkhouse door and called out to one of the healthy men working in the yard. "Johnny, I need you to take over watching the sick men for an hour. Miss Hart needs to rest." "Wade, I'm fine." "You're dead on your feet. When's the last time you ate?" Lillian couldn't remember. "Yesterday sometime, before the dance." "That's what I thought. Come on." He took her hand, gentle but firm. "You're going to eat something and sleep for at least a few hours. That's not a request." He led her to the kitchen, sat her down at the work table, and started rummaging through her supplies with the determination of a man on a mission. "What are you doing?" "Making you breakfast, or lunch, whatever meal this counts as." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Wade found eggs and bread and bacon. "How do you like your eggs?" "Wade, this is silly. I can cook my own." "Scrambled it is." Lillian watched in bemusement as Wade Mercer, successful rancher and her employer, clumsily attempted to scramble eggs. He burned the first batch, undercooked the second, and finally produced something edible on the third try. "It's not as good as yours," he said, setting the plate in front of her, "but it'll keep you from collapsing." The eggs were slightly rubbery and over-salted, but they were the best thing Lillian had ever tasted because Wade had made them for her. Because he was standing in her kitchen looking worried and determined and refusing to let her work herself to death. "Eat," he ordered. "Then you're going to sleep for at least 4 hours. I'll watch the men." "You don't know what to do." "So you'll teach me. Real quick, right now. Tell me what I need to watch for. Then you sleep." So Lillian ate her mediocre eggs and gave Wade a crash course in fever management. Told him what symptoms to worry about, how often to check temperatures, when to force fluids, and when to let them rest. He listened with the same intense focus he brought to everything, asking questions until he understood. "Got it," he said finally. "Now sleep." "Wade, please, Lillian, let me take care of you the way you've been taking care of everyone else. Just for a few hours." She was too tired to argue. Let Wade lead her to her small room off the kitchen, let him help her out of her stained apron and shoes. He pulled a blanket over her and stepped back toward the door. "Wade?" Her voice was small in the dim room. "I'm sorry for what I said last night. You didn't deserve that. We'll talk about it when you're rested. Sleep now." Lillian closed her eyes, expecting sleep to be impossible despite her exhaustion. But knowing Wade was watching over the men, knowing she could finally let go of the responsibility for just a few hours, she fell asleep almost immediately. She woke to darkness and the smell of cooking. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't figure out where she was or what time it was. Then memory came flooding back. The fever, the long night, Wade making her terrible eggs. She stumbled into the kitchen to find Wade at her stove, attempting to prepare dinner with Tommy's help. "How long was I out?" 6 hours, Wade said without turning around. "Fever's down in most of the men. Charlie's asking for food, which the doc says is a good sign. Frank's still pretty sick, but he's stable." "And you learned all this how?" "Doc came back to check on them, gave me some pointers. Complimented your work, by the way. Said he's never seen a civilian manage a fever outbreak better." Pride bloomed warm in Lillian's chest. "He said that?" "He did. Also said you probably saved at least 2 lives by keeping them hydrated through the worst of it." Wade finally turned to look at her. "You slept through dinner, so I'm making you something now. It won't be good, but it'll be food." Lillian moved to the stove and peered into the pot Wade was tending. Soup, from the looks of it, though calling it that was generous. The vegetables were unevenly cut, the broth was too thin, and he'd clearly forgotten to season it. But he'd tried. For her, he'd tried. "Here." She reached for the salt. Let me just... Wade caught her hand. No, you're going to sit down and let me feed you for once, even if it's bad. Wade, sit down. So Lillian sat and watched Wade Mercer serve her a bowl of mediocre vegetable soup with slightly burned bread on the side. It was possibly the worst meal ever prepared in her kitchen, and she loved every bite because it meant something beyond the food itself. It meant Wade saw her not just as the person who took care of everyone else, but as someone who deserved care in return. They ate in comfortable silence, and when the meal was done, Wade started cleaning up without being asked. Lillian moved to help, but he waved her off. I got this. You've done enough. Wade, we need to talk. About last night, about what Helena said, about... I know, but not tonight. Tonight you're going to rest, and I'm going to watch the bunkhouse. And tomorrow, when the crisis is past and you're not running on fumes, we'll talk. Really talk. About everything. It was the most sensible thing he could have said, and Lillian knew it. But part of her wanted to talk now, wanted to clear the air, wanted to know where they stood. Okay, she agreed. Tomorrow. Wade left to check on the men, and Lillian went back to her room. But this time, sleep wouldn't come. She lay in the dark, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. The dance, Helena's cruelty, the fever outbreak, Wade making her soup with his own clumsy hands. She thought about how he'd looked at her when he said he was choosing her, not settling. About the way he'd taken over her duties without complaint so she could rest. About the fact that he was out there right now, probably sitting beside some sick cowboy's bed, doing work he'd never done before because he wanted to lighten her load. Helena had asked if Lillian was using Wade, or if he was using her. But what if it wasn't about using at all? What if it was about two people who'd both been alone too long finding each other and trying, however imperfectly, to build something real? What if Wade was telling the truth, and he really did choose her? The question followed Lillian into restless dreams, and was still there when she woke the next morning to find the fever had broken in all but one of the men. The crisis was passing, the ranch was recovering, and tomorrow, the tomorrow Wade had promised, had arrived. The last of the sick men recovered on a Thursday morning when spring had finally decided to stay. Tom sat up in bed asking for real food instead of broth, and Charlie managed to walk to the outhouse without assistance. The crisis that had consumed the ranch for 5 days was officially over. Lillian stood in the doorway of the bunkhouse watching the men slowly return to themselves, talking, joking, complaining about being confined to bed. They looked thinner, weaker, but alive. All of them alive. You did that, Wade said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Every single one of them is here because of you. The doctor said you did everything right, that most frontier settlements would have lost at least 2 men to a fever like this, but you didn't lose anyone. Wade's voice was rough with emotion. You saved them, Lillian. She wanted to deflect, to minimize what she'd done, but the gratitude in the men's eyes when they looked at her made that impossible. She had saved them. She'd fought for their lives with nothing but willpower and kitchen remedies and sheer stubborn refusal to let them die on her watch. We need to talk, Wade said. The talk we postponed. You up for it? Lillian's stomach tightened with nerves, but she nodded. Where? Somewhere private. Come with me. He led her away from the bunkhouse, past the barn, and the chicken coop, up a slight rise that overlooked the ranch. From here you could see the whole spread, the buildings laid out in their careful order, the pastures stretching toward distant mountains, the creek that marked the eastern boundary sparkling in morning sun. I used to come up here when I first built this place, Wade said, settling onto a flat rock, when everything felt impossible and I wasn't sure I could make it work. I'd sit here and look at what I was trying to build and tell myself it would be worth it eventually. Lillian sat beside him, close enough to touch but not touching. Was it? Worth it? I thought so. For a long time I thought the ranch was enough. Work and land and building something that would last, that felt like purpose. He picked up a small stone, turned it over in his hands. Then you showed up, and suddenly the ranch wasn't enough anymore. Suddenly I wanted more. Wade, let me say this, please. I've been practicing it in my head for days, And if I don't get it out now, I might lose my nerve. He took a deep breath. You asked me the other night if I would have looked at you twice if we'd met differently, if you weren't my cook, if circumstances hadn't thrown us together. And I didn't know how to answer because the question felt impossible. Because the answer is no, Lillian said quietly. I understand that, Wade. I'm not. The answer is I don't know. Wade turned to face her fully. And the reason I don't know isn't because you're not worth looking at. It's because the man I was before you came here wasn't paying attention to much of anything except work. I was so buried in routines and responsibilities that I'd forgotten how to see people as anything other than problems to solve or tasks to complete. He set down the stone and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. But you made me pay attention, Lillian. From that first breakfast when you fed 20 hungry men without breaking a sweat, you made me look up from my ledgers and my fence repairs and actually see what was right in front of me. And what I saw was someone stronger and braver and more capable than anyone I'd ever met. Someone who didn't just cook food, but created warmth. Who didn't just do a job, but built a home. That's what I do, Wade. It's my work. It doesn't mean... It means everything. His grip on her hand tightened. Because somewhere between the biscuits and the blizzard rescue and watching you refuse to give up on sick men who everyone said might die, I fell in love with you. Not with what you do for me, with who you are. Lillian's eyes burned. You can't know that. You can't know who I am separate from what I do because we've never been separate. I've been your cook since the day we met. You're right. We've never been separate, but I've seen you in every possible situation, exhausted and scared and angry and triumphant. I've seen you at your worst and your best and every shade in between. And I love all of it, Lillian. Every stubborn, difficult, beautiful part of you. Even the parts Helena was right about? That I'm using you for security? Helena wasn't right about anything. Wade's voice turned fierce. She's a bitter woman who can't stand seeing other people find happiness she threw away. Yes, you needed work when I hired you. Yes, I needed a cook. But what grew between us has nothing to do with desperation or convenience. It has to do with the fact that you make me laugh. That you challenge me when I'm being an idiot. That you fit into my life like you were always meant to be here. Lillian looked out at the ranch spread below them, at the kitchen where she'd spent the past months building something she hadn't known she needed. A home, a purpose, a place where she mattered. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm terrified that one day you'll wake up and see me the way everyone else does. As the fat girl who got lucky because a rancher needed help. And then this, whatever we have, it'll end and I'll be alone again and it'll hurt worse than anything ever has. You think I'm not scared? Wade laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lillian, I'm terrified. I'm 42 years old and I've been alone most of my adult life. I've convinced myself I'm better off that way, that needing people makes you weak. And then you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. Now I can't imagine going back to how things were. Can't imagine breakfast without seeing you at the stove or evenings without washing dishes beside you or any of it without you there. What if it doesn't work? What if we're wrong about this? Then we'll be wrong together. But Lillian, I don't think we're wrong. I think we're the rightest thing I've felt in 20 years. He stood up and pulled her to her feet, his hands warm and certain on hers. I want you to stay. Not as my cook, though I hope you'll keep cooking because my men might riot otherwise, but as my partner. As the woman I'm courting with the intention of making my wife, if you'll have me. I want to build a life with you, Lillian, a real one. Not just employment and convenience, but something that matters. The words hung in the spring air between them, clear and unmistakable. Wade Mercer was offering her everything she'd ever wanted and never thought she could have. A future, a home, love. People will talk, she said, but her voice was weak. Let them talk. I don't care. Your business partners will do business with me or they won't. My ranch stands on its own merit, same as you do. Wade, I'm not what men marry. You're what I want to marry. That's all that matters. He cupped her face in his hands. Tell me you don't feel this too. Tell me it's all one-sided and I'll step back. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then give us a chance. Please. Lillian looked up at this man who'd shown up at her cabin in the middle of winter with a job offer and somehow given her back her life. She thought about the past months, the gradual shift from employer and employee to something deeper, the way he'd defended her against Helena's cruelty, the terrible soup he'd made because she needed feeding and he wanted to be the one to do it. She thought about going back to her cabin by the creek, to loneliness and poverty and the slow fade into invisibility. Thought about leaving this ranch, these men, this kitchen that had become hers. Thought about leaving Wade. "I love you," she whispered, and saying it felt like stepping off a cliff. "I've loved you for weeks and I've been so scared of it because I didn't think I was allowed to want this. Didn't think someone like you could want someone like me. Someone like me is damn lucky someone like you is even considering him." Wade's smile was brilliant. "Is that a yes? You'll stay? You'll give us a real chance?" "Yes." The word came out stronger this time. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I want to build something with you. Yes to all of it." Wade kissed her then, right there on the hillside overlooking his ranch, and Lillian kissed him back with everything she had. All the fear and hope and love she'd been holding back came pouring out, and when they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, she felt lighter than she had in years. "We should get back," Wade said eventually. "The men will be wondering where we disappeared to." "Let them wonder." Lillian laced her fingers through his. "I've spent my whole life worrying what people think. Maybe it's time I stopped." They walked back down the hill hand in hand, and if the ranch hands noticed and exchanged knowing glances, neither Lillian nor Wade cared. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. The men recovered fully from the fever and threw themselves back into spring tasks with renewed energy. Calving season hit in full force, keeping everyone busy from dawn until well past dark. Lillian's kitchen became command central, feeding hungry workers and serving as impromptu medical station for the inevitable injuries that came with ranch work. But now, when Wade stayed after dinner to help with dishes, he kissed her goodnight before leaving. Now when they passed in the yard, he'd touch her hand or her shoulder, small gestures of affection that made Lillian's heart race. Now when she looked up from her work and caught him watching her, he didn't look away. They were courting. Properly, openly courting, and if anyone had a problem with it, they kept it to themselves. Tommy was the first to comment on the change. "You're smiling again, Miss Lillian, like you did after the dance, before everything went sideways." "I am?" "All the time. It's nice. You should smile more." "I'm working on it." The work itself had changed too. Wade had made good on his promise that she wasn't just the cook anymore. He started asking her opinion on ranch decisions, where to rotate the cattle, when to plant the kitchen garden, whether they should hire more seasonal help. Lillian discovered she had good instincts for management, could see solutions Wade sometimes missed because he was too close to the problems. "You're good at this," he said one evening as they reviewed supply orders together. "The business side, I mean. You see patterns I don't. It's not so different from running a kitchen. You plan ahead, anticipate needs, make sure you've got resources where you need them. Still, you've got a head for it." Wade marked something in the ledger. "I was thinking once we're married, maybe you'd want to take over some of the administrative work. The bookkeeping and supply management would free me up to focus more on the livestock." "Once we're married," he said it so casually, like it was already decided. "Wade Mercer, are you proposing?" He looked up, startled. "What? No, I mean, not yet. I'm planning to, but I wanted to do it proper, with a ring and, damn it, I'm ruining the surprise, aren't I?" Lillian laughed. "Little bit. Forget I said anything. When I propose, it'll be romantic and memorable and nothing like this conversation. I'll look forward to it." But 3 days later, romance took a backseat to crisis when word came from town that Helena Drake had been spreading rumors. Vicious ones. Pete brought the news, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Lillian, there's talk in town you should know about. Mrs. Drake's been telling people that that you and he are living in sin, that you're taking advantage of him, using feminine wiles to trap him into marriage for his money." Lillian's stomach dropped. "What?" "It's garbage. Everyone here knows it. But she's got some of the church ladies all worked up, and they're saying Wade needs to send you away before you ruin his reputation." Pete's face was red with anger. "I'm only telling you because I figured you'd want to know what's being said." "Does Wade know?" "If he doesn't yet, he will soon. Frank rode to town this morning, and he'll hear it for sure. Lillian sat down hard on a kitchen stool. This was what she'd been afraid of. Helena's revenge, delivered in the form of gossip designed to destroy both Lillian's character and Wade's standing in the community. "What are you going to do?" Tommy asked quietly. "I don't know. Maybe I should leave. If I'm gone, the gossip stops and Wade's reputation—" "Don't you dare!" Wade's voice came from the doorway. He looked furious. "Don't you dare let Helena win this. Wade, she's telling people I know what she's saying. Frank told me, and here's what we're going to do about it." Wade crossed the kitchen and took both of Lillian's hands. "We're going to town tomorrow. Together. And we're going to walk into that church social with our heads held high and let everyone see that I'm proud to be courting you. That I choose you and I don't give a damn what Helena Drake or anyone else thinks about it. That'll just make it worse. Or it'll make it better. Lillian, hiding won't stop the gossip. It'll just confirm what Helena's saying, that we've got something to be ashamed of. But we don't. I'm courting you honorably, with every intention of marrying you, and if people can't accept that, it's their problem, not ours. Wade, think about this. Your business relationships, your standing in the community, mean nothing if I don't have you." He pulled her to her feet. "I'm done letting other people's opinions run my life. I'm done pretending I don't care about you to make small-minded people more comfortable. Tomorrow, we face this together. Unless you're not ready. Unless you want to wait." Lillian thought about Helena's smug face, about the church ladies who'd probably never spoken a kind word to her in her life, now acting scandalized on Wade's behalf. Thought about spending one more day hiding what she felt, pretending she didn't love this man with everything she had. "No," she said firmly. "I'm ready. We'll go together." The church social was held in the town square, a spring tradition that brought out everyone within 20 miles. By the time Wade and Lillian arrived in his buggy, the square was already crowded with families, tables laden with food, children running wild between the adults. Lillian wore her blue dress and Frank's wife's shawl. Wade wore his good suit and an expression that dared anyone to comment. They walked into that square hand in hand, and the conversations didn't just pause, they stopped completely. Every eye turned to them. Lillian felt the weight of judgment, felt people assessing and finding her wanting, felt exactly like the fat girl the town had mocked for years. Then Wade squeezed her hand and leaned close enough to whisper, "Chin up, you're worth 10 of any person here." Helena was holding court near the dessert table, surrounded by women who hung on her every word. When she saw Wade and Lillian, her expression flickered between shock and fury before settling on cruel amusement. "Well, well, the happy couple graces us with their presence," Helena's voice carried across the square. "How brave of you to show your face in polite society, Miss Hart. Though I suppose when one has nothing to lose, shame becomes irrelevant." "That's enough, Helena." Wade's voice was cold. "You've spread your poison. Now keep your mouth shut before I forget you're a woman." Such gallantry. "Tell me, Wade, does Miss Hart know you're only defending her because she's got you trapped? That you're too honorable to abandon her now that she's compromised herself living at your ranch?" "The only person compromised here is you." Wade stepped forward, putting himself between Helena and Lillian. "You're a married woman carrying on an obvious affair with half the men in Cheyenne, and you have the gall to question Lillian's character? She's worth 100 of you on your best day." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Helena's face went white, then red. "How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? How dare I point out that you're attacking Lillian because you can't stand seeing me happy with someone who actually values me for who I am instead of what I can provide?" Wade's voice rang out clear and strong. "You had your chance, Helena. You chose money over love. That's fine. But don't come around now trying to destroy what I've found just because you're miserable in your own choices." "Wade, please." Marcus Drake appeared at his wife's elbow, looking mortified. "This isn't necessary." "It is necessary, because Helena's been spreading lies about a good woman who doesn't deserve it. Lillian Hart is one of the finest people I've ever known. She's honest and hardworking and braver than half the men in this town. And yes, I'm courting her. Yes, I plan to marry her. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly, instead of whispering behind her back." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from the back of the crowd, Frank's voice rang out. "Miss Lillian saved my life when that fever hit. Saved 7 of us, working day and night with no thought for herself. She's got more courage in her little finger than most folks have in their whole bodies. Saved my nephew, too, Tom Brennan added. Boy would have frozen to death in that blizzard if she hadn't risked her own life to find him. One by one, the men from Mercer Ranch stepped forward, adding their voices to Wade's defense. Tommy talked about how Lillian had taught him to cook, giving him skills that meant he could help his family. Pete mentioned how she'd helped him make a cake for his grieving sister. Charlie described how she'd sat with him all night when his fever spiked, refusing to let him die. By the time they finished, half the town was looking at Lillian with new eyes. Not the fat girl to be mocked, but the woman who'd saved lives and built a home and earned the loyalty of good men through her own merit. Helena looked like she'd been slapped. This is ridiculous. You're all under her spell. Can't you see that? She's manipulating all of you. The only person manipulating anyone is you. Wade cut her off. And I'm done listening to it. Lillian and I are leaving. But before we go, I want to make something very clear. He turned to face the crowd, still holding Lillian's hand. I love Lillian Hart. I'm going to marry her whether you approve or not. And if that costs me business or reputation or anything else, so be it. Because she's worth more than all of it combined. Anyone who can't see that is welcome to stay away from my ranch and my life. Then he turned to Lillian, and in front of the entire town, he kissed her. It wasn't a peck or a polite gesture. It was a real kiss, the kind that left no doubt about his intentions or his feelings. When he pulled back, Lillian was dizzy, and the crowd was murmuring, and Helena looked like she might explode. Ready to go? Wade asked. More than ready. They walked back to the buggy together through a crowd that parted silently before them. Some faces showed disapproval, others curiosity, but a surprising number showed something that looked almost like respect. As Wade helped Lillian into the buggy, a voice called out, "Wait!" An older woman Lillian vaguely recognized from the mercantile hurried over, slightly out of breath. "Miss Hart, I wanted to say, that is, I heard what you did during the fever. My son works at the ranch, and he wrote me that you saved his life. I wanted to thank you, and to apologize for not being kinder to you over the years." Lillian didn't know what to say. The woman's eyes were sincere, her gratitude genuine. "You're welcome. I'm glad he recovered." "Me too. And Miss Hart? I think Wade Mercer is a very lucky man." As they drove away from town, Lillian couldn't stop the tears that came. Not from sadness this time, but from something so overwhelming she didn't have words for it. "You okay?" Wade asked gently. "You stood up for me, in front of everyone. You chose me over your reputation, over Helena, over everything." "Of course I did. Lillian, you're the most important thing in my life. Nothing else even comes close. I love you." She said it fiercely, like a vow. "I love you so much it scares me." "Good, because what I'm about to do is going to scare you even more." Wade pulled the buggy to a stop on the road overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. He climbed down and came around to her side, then dropped to one knee in the dirt road. "Wade, what are you Hush, I'm proposing." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "I know I said I'd do this romantic and memorable, but I can't wait anymore. Lillian Hart, you are the bravest, strongest, most magnificent woman I've ever known. You make me want to be better than I am. You make my ranch feel like a home, and my life feel like it has meaning beyond work and survival. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the person I get to love for the rest of my life?" Lillian looked at this man kneeling in the dirt, offering her everything she'd ever wanted. All the fear, all the doubt, all the years of being told she wasn't enough. It all fell away in the face of Wade Mercer's absolute certainty. "Yes," she said, and her voice didn't shake at all. "Yes, I'll marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her properly, and Lillian thought that maybe impossible things could come true after all. Maybe you could be broken and damaged and afraid and still find someone who saw your worth. Maybe you could be the girl everyone mocked and become the woman someone chose. Maybe love didn't care about waist sizes or social standing or any of the arbitrary rules the world tried to impose. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch, surrounded by the men who'd become Lillian's family. No church ladies, no society people, no Helena Drake casting poison from the sidelines. Just the people who mattered, celebrating a love that had been built on honesty and respect, and the gradual realization that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. Tommy stood up as Wade's best man, grinning like he'd personally arranged the whole thing. Frank walked Lillian down the makeshift aisle in the ranch yard, his weathered face suspiciously shiny with unshed tears. The circuit preacher spoke about partnership and choosing each other daily, about building a life on shared values instead of shared bloodlines. When Wade slipped a second ring onto Lillian's finger to join the engagement band, his hands were steady. When Lillian promised to love and honor him for the rest of her days, her voice was strong. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled ranch hands probably carried all the way to town. The celebration afterward featured the finest meal Lillian had ever prepared: roasted beef and fresh bread and 3 kinds of pie, served family style at long tables set up in the yard. The men ate and drank and told increasingly exaggerated stories about Wade's courtship, while both bride and groom laughed. As the sun set and the party continued into evening, Wade pulled Lillian away from the crowd, leading her up to their spot on the hillside overlooking the ranch. "Happy, Mrs. Mercer?" Lillian tested the name, felt how it fit. "Very happy, Mr. Mercer." "Good, because I have something for you." Wade pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Wedding present." Inside was a deed. Lillian read it twice before she understood what she was seeing. "Wade, this is the deed to the ranch. Why are you— Read the names on it." She looked closer. The property was now registered to Wade Mercer and Lillian Mercer, joint owners, equal partners. "I don't understand." "This ranch is ours now, truly ours. Not mine that you live on, but something we build together. I want your name on everything, Lillian. I want the world to know that this place belongs to both of us." Lillian's throat was too tight for words. She held the deed like it was made of glass, this piece of paper that said she belonged somewhere, that she owned something, that she was someone who mattered. "Thank you," she managed finally, "for this, for everything, for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for letting me see you, for trusting me enough to stay." Wade pulled her close. "I love you, Lillian, today and every day after." They stood together on the hillside as full dark fell, and the party below them continued, watching their ranch, their home, glow with lantern light and laughter. Lillian thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, living alone in a cabin by a frozen creek, believing she had nothing to offer the world. That girl wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become, wouldn't believe that the fat, lonely, worthless girl could transform into someone's wife, someone's partner, someone who commanded respect and built a home and saved lives. But the transformation hadn't been magic. It had been work and courage, and the willingness to take a chance when one was offered. It had been Wade seeing worth where she couldn't, and Lillian slowly learning to see it too. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, his arms warm around her. "How far I've come. How different everything is." "Any regrets?" Lillian thought about it honestly, about the hardships and the cruelty and the fear, about Helena's venom and the town's judgment, about every moment she doubted herself and Wade and what they were building. "Not one," she said finally, "not a single regret." The ranch below them continued its celebration, and somewhere in the bunkhouse someone started playing a fiddle. The music drifted up the hillside, sweet and simple, and Wade held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Mercer?" Lillian took his hand and let him spin her around under the stars, dancing on a hillside with no one watching, nothing to prove. Just 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and chose to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. The months that followed brought their own challenges. Running a ranch was hard work, and being a rancher's wife was harder than Lillian had imagined. There were early mornings and late nights, difficult decisions and occasional failures. There were still people in town who whispered about Wade Mercer and his unfortunate choice of bride. But there were victories too. The ranch prospered under their joint management, Lillian's organizational skills complementing Wade's ranching knowledge. The kitchen became famous across 3 counties, with travelers going miles out of their way to taste Lillian Mercer's cooking. The men who worked for them were loyal and hardworking, knowing they were valued and cared for. And slowly, grudgingly, even the town of Redemption Flats began to change its opinion. When Lillian organized a relief effort after a fire destroyed 3 families' homes, providing meals and shelter without asking for anything in return, people remembered. When she nursed the schoolteacher through pneumonia, sitting up 3 nights straight to keep the woman alive, people noticed. When she opened her kitchen to teach young girls to cook, sharing her skills freely with anyone who wanted to learn, people started to see her differently. By the time their first anniversary rolled around, Lillian Mercer was no longer the fat girl from the cabin by the creek. She was Mrs. Mercer, co-owner of the most successful ranch in the territory, known for her cooking and her courage and her kind heart. She was someone who mattered. The anniversary fell on a perfect June day, warm and clear, with wildflowers covering the meadows in waves of color. Wade declared it a holiday for the whole ranch, giving the men the day off with pay. He and Lillian packed a picnic and rode out to their hillside, the spot where he'd proposed and where they'd danced under the stars on their wedding night. "One year," Wade said, spreading out a blanket in the grass. "Feels like longer, like you've always been here." "In a good way or a bad way?" "The best way. Like I can't remember what it was like before you, and I don't want to remember. This is better." They ate cheese and bread and cold chicken, drank wine Wade had been saving for a special occasion, and watched clouds drift across the endless Wyoming sky. Lillian leaned back against Wade's chest, his arms around her, and felt more at peace than she'd ever imagined possible. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for coming to my cabin that night, for giving me a chance when no one else would." "You thank me every day. Every meal you cook, every problem you solve, every time you smile at me across the breakfast table. That's thanks enough." "Still, I was drowning back then, and I didn't even know it. You threw me a rope. You climbed out on your own strength. I just pointed the way." Wade pressed a kiss to her temple. "Besides, I'm the one who should be thanking you. You took a broken-down rancher and taught him how to live again." "You weren't broken down." "I was. Just too stubborn to admit it, but you saw through the stubborn to the loneliness underneath, and you didn't run. You stayed and you fought, and you made this place into something worth coming home to." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ranch spread out below them. Lillian could see Tommy in the yard teaching one of the newer hands how to repair a saddle, could see the chickens scratching in their yard, the cattle grazing in the near pasture, smoke rising from the chimney of a kitchen that was truly hers now. This was her kingdom. This ranch, these people, this life she'd built with determination and love and refusal to accept the limitations the world tried to impose. "I'm pregnant," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she'd planned them. "About 2 months along. I've been waiting for the right time to tell you, and I guess this is it." Wade went very still behind her. Then his arms tightened around her middle, gentle but certain. "A baby?" His voice was rough with emotion. "We're having a baby?" "We are. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Wade turned her in his arms so he could see her face. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Lillian, you've given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a partner, and now a child. How could I be anything but happy?" "I'm scared," Lillian admitted. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if—" "You won't be. You'll be exactly what our child needs, same as you're exactly what I need. Strong and brave and full of love." Wade cupped her face in his hands. "We'll figure it out together. That's what partners do." The baby arrived the following February, a healthy girl with her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn determination. They named her Sarah, after Wade's mother, and she was welcomed into the world by an entire ranch of surrogate uncles who competed to see who could spoil her most. Watching Wade hold their daughter for the first time, seeing the wonder on his face as Sarah wrapped her tiny hand around his calloused finger, Lillian felt something in her chest expand until it hurt. This was her family, her home, her life. Not the one she'd dreamed of as a girl, before the world taught her that girls who looked like her weren't allowed to dream. This was better, harder won and more precious because of it. Tommy, now promoted to foreman, brought the other men to meet the new arrival. They filed through the bedroom in their work clothes, hats in hands, looking at the baby with a mixture of awe and terror. "She's real small," Pete observed. "You sure she's going to make it?" "She's perfect," Lillian said firmly. "And she's going to grow up right here on this ranch, learning from all of you that strength comes in all forms, that courage matters more than size, that kindness is the most important thing you can offer the world." Frank cleared his throat gruffly. "We'll look after her, Miss Lillian. All of us. She's a Mercer Ranch baby. That makes her ours too." And she was. Sarah Mercer grew up surrounded by cowboys who taught her to ride before she could walk properly, who let her help with ranch work from the time she was old enough to toddle after them, who treated her like the precious miracle she was. She grew up watching her mother run a kitchen and a ranch with equal skill, never learning that women weren't supposed to be capable of such things. She grew up seeing her father treat her mother as an equal partner, never learning that husbands were meant to dominate their wives. She grew up knowing she was loved, valued, and capable of anything she set her mind to. And when Sarah was 5 and asked her mother how she and Papa had met, Lillian told her the truth about the winter cabin and the desperate job offer and the slow transformation from employee to partner to wife. "Were you scared, Mama?" Sarah asked. "Terrified. But your papa taught me that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is try, even when you're certain you'll fail." "Did you fail?" "Not even once." Lillian pulled her daughter close. "The only failure would have been not trying at all. And that's the most important lesson I can teach you, sweet girl. When life offers you a chance, even a scary one, take it. You never know what beautiful things might come from having the courage to say yes." Years passed. The ranch prospered. Wade's hair turned silver at the temples, and Lillian developed laugh lines around her eyes. Sarah grew tall and confident, eventually leaving for college back east, though she promised to return. The men of the original crew grew older or moved on, replaced by new hands who learned quickly that Mrs. Mercer was not to be trifled with, and Mr. Mercer would defend her against any slight. The town of Redemption Flats slowly forgot that Lillian Mercer had ever been anyone other than the respected rancher's wife. The new generation knew her only as the woman who'd built the most successful ranch kitchen in the territory, who'd raised funds for the new school, who'd taught half the girls in 3 counties how to cook. Helena Drake's name was occasionally mentioned in society pages from Denver, usually in connection with scandals or her latest marriage. She'd gone through 3 husbands by the time she was 50, always searching for something she couldn't name and never quite finding it. Lillian sometimes thought about writing to her, about reaching out with forgiveness, or at least acknowledgement. But in the end, she decided some people had to make their own peace with their choices. Helena had chosen bitterness and cruelty. Lillian had chosen courage and love. Both of them had to live with the consequences. On their 20th anniversary, Wade and Lillian returned to their hillside. They were older now, moving a bit slower, but the love between them had only deepened with time. 20 years, Wade marveled. Doesn't seem possible. Best 20 years of my life. Lillian leaned against him, fitting into the curve of his body as naturally as breathing. "You know what I was thinking about the other day? That cabin by the creek where I used to live. Wondering if it's still standing. Want to go see?" They rode out the next morning, following the creek east toward town. The cabin was still there, though barely. The roof had caved in on one side. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. The windows were empty of glass. Lillian stood in front of it, remembering the girl who'd lived here. The lonely, scared, broken girl who'd believed she had nothing to offer the world. "I was so small then," she said quietly. "Not in body, but in spirit. I'd made myself so small to fit into the tiny space the world was willing to give me." "You're not small anymore." Wade took her hand. "You're magnificent. I'm the same person I was then, same body, same face. The world didn't change its mind about what I look like." "No, but you changed your mind about what that means. You stopped letting other people define your worth." Wade pulled her close. "That's what I saw when I came to your cabin that night. Not your size or your circumstances, but the potential hidden underneath all that learned helplessness. I saw someone strong trying very hard to be invisible. And you made me visible. You made yourself visible. I just gave you a stage to do it on." They stood together looking at the ruins of Lillian's old life, and she felt no regret. That cabin represented everything she'd left behind, the poverty and loneliness and quiet desperation. But it had also been the place where her transformation began, where Wade Mercer had knocked on her door and offered her a chance she almost hadn't taken. "Thank you," she said one more time, "for the chance, for the love, for all of it." Wade kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to take it, for saying yes when it would have been easier to say no, for building this life with me." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, back to the home they'd built together from nothing but hard work and determination and love that had started as convenience and become something eternal. And if anyone in Redemption Flat still remembered the fat girl who'd lived in that cabin by the creek, they never mentioned it. Because that girl was gone, transformed into something the world had to acknowledge whether it wanted to or not. She'd become Lillian Mercer, rancher, cook, wife, mother, friend. She'd become someone who mattered, and that, in the end, was the only transformation that counted.